rise, please, for the invocation, or remain standing for the pledge to the flag. Father, we are thankful for this another opportunity that you have given us as servants of this county to come together to discuss the means and the ways to best serve the county and the citizens thereof. We just pray for your wisdom and your guidance in all that we do this evening. In Jesus' name.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Tell everybody to turn their cell phones off, including me this time. Cost me $5 last time. So Ricky took their money. All right, first item, consideration of a resolution to approve the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as listed.
I'll let you vote for a second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve the minutes for the August 20th, 2013 Keep Effingham Beautiful Incorporated Workshop and the minutes of the August 20th, 2013 Commissioners Meeting. No questions or discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. We'll have two appearances, one at 5:30 and one at 5:45. So we'll go forward to the consent agenda, please. First item, consideration to approve the second reading to rezone 10 acres located off of Sand Hill Road from AR1 to I1, map 301-4E for Darrell Morgan. Item number 2, consideration to approve the second reading to rezone 12.74 acres located off of Blue Jay Road from AR1 to I1, map 351-4 for Tim Wordite. Item number 3, consideration to approve the second reading to rezone 3.723 acres located at 143 3rd Street from AR1 to AR2, map 296A-129 for Arvin D. Spell. Item number 4, consideration to approve the second reading for a variance to place a second dwelling on a property located at 838 U.S. Highway 80 for John M. Jordan, map 302-338A. Item number 5, consideration to approve the second reading for a conditional use to operate a surface mine located at 1635 Old River Road, map 331-2 and 24 for R.B. Baker Construction. Item number 6, consideration to approve the second reading to rezone 4.34 acres from B2 to R1 located at 3185 Highway 21 South, map 430-2 for James Overmar. And item number 7, consideration to approve an assemblage permit for Frank Remsick for Royal Oaks Plantation on October 31st for a Halloween event. That is the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the bill.
A second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. All right, going forward to old business, consideration to approve a refund in the amount of $600 to Kenneth Shores. This was tabled 8/10.
Hello, George Shaw, zoning administrator. Once again, Mr. Shores is unable to attend. He says he had a sick relative He did supply a receipt, which I believe the board was looking for, to show that he did expend the $600. If you want to see it, I can put it on the overhead. I just got it within the last hour. You want to put that up? No. But
I don't want to see technical difficulties, I apologize.
oh, okay. So he did, according to this receipt, he did expend the $600 on 7/25/13. And if there are any other questions, I'll be glad
Is it a
to.
payment received from a company? Is it a canceled check? What is it?
It is a receipt from the mobile home company.
I believe it's the same receipt that was in your book last time this was over.
Last time was the canceled check.
Oh, it's
You want to pass it up?
canceled check.
It just looks like a receipt book check.
Yes. I mean, I'd be glad to.
If you want to pass it now.
Okay.
we'll just-
I didn't realize we didn't have the overhead, so.
Projectors aren't working.
I can't cause them to. They probably are working if someone else can operate.
And Mr. Short wasn't able to attend.
No, he called again just within the last hour. That got faxed to us, and he called saying he won't be here.
Wasn't there a question at the last when we tabled it, whether he possibly wanted to come for a variance?
No, he's been contacted since that was discussed. He's
Okay.
found other
Okay.
he's found other accommodations, so he's not interested in variance.
And this is, remind me, this is all brought about by the fact that we did not ask specifically.
We did not specifically ask if he was renting the property, and he says he told us he was. The girls in the office said they did not hear that. And when we found out, we told him he couldn't do that, and he's now asking for a refund for the amount of the pad. We refunded the permit amount, but the amount for the dirt pad, we don't have that authority at this level.
It's not a refund of money the county's received. This
Well,
is-
excuse me, it's not, refund is the incorrect term, excuse me.
Compensated for $600.
Yes.
Paid to someone else.
All right. Not to put the county attorney on the spot, which I'm fixing to do anyhow, but, this is something I've never heard of. So I've asked 2 other counties whether or not they would refund this if it was in their county. Both of them have said no, that the county is protected through some, and they cite this and that and the other.
Had there been a real receipt, he showed it.
So I only get to vote in the case of a tie, but I'll tell you this, if it comes down to a tie, I will vote against refunding the money. Just so that I'm on record for how I feel.
So, again, trying to refresh this, building permit was issued, the building permit has been refunded
Correct,
because the building permit wasn't used.
correct.
But apparently, they had some work done on the site.
They had the pad put in, evidently at the cost of $600, and he would like compensation for that, since he was not allowed to place a mobile home there.
So, what was the for that refund?
So the question is, do we have responsibility? Did somebody not tell him, or
Correct.
did he have no way of knowing?
Well, I mean, he could have looked at our ordinances if he wanted to go to that point. Now, again,
Once
we
issue
have
the
changed.
permit, even if our ordinance is different,
Yes.
once we issue him a permit,
We did not, at the time, have a policy to specifically ask who the property owner is. We do now.
yes.
It's the first time it's come up since I've been in this department.
Basically made the assumption he was putting mobile home on his own.
On his own property, yes. He says, he told them it was a rental, neither of them heard rental. That's just, I wasn't there myself, so.
How did he arrive at the knowledge, like he spent the dirt room, and then he's like, oh, I can't move forward? How did that occur?
I believe it was a conversation either one of the inspectors or myself had with the mobile home company where this came up, that it was a rental property. And then we looked into it and found out, yes, it was indeed a rental property, and told them they couldn't do that.
Mr. Chairman, the general rule is that when a permit is issued in error, the applicant has no recourse against it. That's the general rule.
Of course.
Well,
Of course.
this is a new one on me too, so.
The candidate give him no bad information, they just didn't give him any information for us.
They just gave him a permit.
They just gave him a
Yes.
permit and took his money.
Correct.
And he took for granted that he was doing the right thing and spent $600 on a pad.
Correct.
The permitting rules and ordinances are all available for anyone who wants to, for the applicant to review.
Has anyone looked to see if there is $600 worth of work?
I wouldn't know how to judge that. Evidently, there is a pad out there. No, I haven't been by, to be honest.
Eric, did you say that's a state law? Is that what you're saying?
That's the general rule from the cases, the decisions that discuss these kinds of permitting errors, where basically the permit was issued in error because the person who issued it had no authority to under the rules, then the applicant has no recourse.
But the permit fee was refunded as a refund of a permit that wasn't used,
Correct.
not as a permit error.
It was issued in error. Yes.
Yeah, I have no problem with refunding the fee that you paid to the county, but the reimbursement part for
And
the pad is
that would be my stand as well.
good for me. I would, to avoid this kind of confusion, I would think that we could, and it may already been done, if we have a form that the applicant.
That's
has
exactly
to
what we have
complete,
now.
Then, then we can put more information in the form.
The correction's been made, and this won't happen again.
Correct.
Well, the correction has been made to the permit application for the permit
Going forward.
requester to say whether it is rental property or whether it's owned property.
We require them to, we require what we call an ownership certificate to be signed at that point by the owner of the property.
Now, the only other way to do that is for this board to take action to change the ordinance itself to allow.
Certainly could do that as well.
So when you say has it been fixed, it could be fixed by this board taking action to change the ordinance to allow for.
I just think, yes, that's a law.
I understand.
Where's the law?
But this particular thing, he don't want it now because
He's made
Well, another route.
he's made other arrangements.
that's right.
Yes.
So they don't want to help him.
So if he would have come to this board and asked for a variance of the ordinance or something like that, we may have been able to accommodate that. But I think to refund the money is opening a precedent that we don't need to.
The reason for this rule was because of somebody putting a rental mobile home on somebody else's property, and then if they don't pay rent, their home is on somebody's property,
Correct.
and the legal issues that go along with
Correct. And
that. So I don't know if you want
Yeah.
to change that.
the state laws on licensing of mobile homes is very particular about how the property owner can't just have it towed away. It's not that simple.
Right.
So,
Now, the property owner could have purchased a mobile home, got the permit, put it there.
and yes, they can lease the mobile home if it's their mobile
It's
home.
mobile home, not.
That's not a problem.
not the-
Correct.
It's fine.
All right. Anybody want to give me a motion?
I'll make a motion we deny these counts. Because of that.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve a final plat and warranty deed for Clover Point, Phase 1 C.
No.
Hmm? Did I miss one?
Old business number 2.
Oh, I missed one. Consideration to amend chapter 75 of the Code of Effingham County and proposal to adopt the backflow prevention by containment policies and procedures. Thank you. We approved the first reading on 8/20. This is the second reading. Anything to add, Mr. Leo?
Actually, yes. At the last meeting, the board asked how we were going to deal with existing installations. I believe you've been provided with a list of all of the existing installations on the county water systems and as to their status. As of right now, there is one active connection that is being used that has no backflow prevention whatsoever. There are also 4 bypass or fire line connections that are sporadically used, occasionally used, that have no protection. And then there are 14 essentially residential connections that are being used as for non-residential purposes, if I can make that sound correct. We're using a residential meter and a residential dual check valve, which is not a traditional backflow preventer, but is what we use on a residential house, is being used on a non-residential, on 14 different non-residential applications. So those are the existing installations that do not meet the requirements of the proposed ordinance and the policy. So what you had asked in the last meeting was for an estimate of what it might cost to address those, and if the board wanted to go ahead and address those problems and have them corrected by the board. The numbers that we put together are approximately $13,000 for the backflow renters and the parts and associated parts. It is a total estimate on labor costs. We would not do this in-house. This would be something we would want to contract out. We don't want county staff going on private property installing items on private lines. So we just threw in an estimate of approximately $10,000. It may be less than that, but that's a reasonable estimate. So you're looking at approximately $23,000 worth of costs to address all of these issues with existing installs. Is that what the board wishes to do? The last time around, that was the inference that the board wanted to fund the correction of anyone that is in place today that is not in compliance with the existing ordinance, the proposed ordinance that we're passing.
But again, the ordinance is necessary to bring us into state compliance.
The ordinance is very much necessary to do that, and the section on existing installs is very much necessary because going forward, after today, anybody could take out an existing install that's compliant. We still would have to have provisions in there for existing as of the date of today. So what we want to make sure is we're dividing, the things that are present prior to today from things that are present
So the
in the
question
future.
is whether the board wants to, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
Is whether or not the board wants to approve the second reading of the ordinance as is and allow the individuals affected by that to fund coming into compliance at their own cost, or whether this board wants to expend approximately $23,000 of county's money to make them come into compliance.
And if you want to spend that sort of money, there wouldn't necessarily be a budget amendment to put that money into the water and sewer budget because it doesn't exist.
Why are double check valves acceptable on the residential 3/4 inch and not a commercial?
It's a dual check valve, and other than bringing the actual charts and drawings of how they work, it's a lower level of protection, and it's appropriate for a residential circumstance, but it's not appropriate for the chemicals and or usage or high usage levels that you might see in a non-residential application.
The county, when those were installed, were they installed by the county?
Which ones?
The
The dual checks that he was just mentioning?
the 14 that were put in that's
Probably half and half. They were certainly purchased from the county because that's the way the procedure works for residential. So when they came in and purchased a residential size meter, they were quoted the same price as a residential house would be quoted, which includes the box and the dual check valve that comes with the box. So whether we installed it or whether they installed it, I couldn't tell you for every single one. But
so at the time that was purchased,
We didn't require anything different.
We had no policy written down that required anything different. And without a policy and a written procedure, we couldn't make them do anything.
The county didn't have a policy, but did the state, is the same state
No,
ordinances,
the-
were they in place then that we're having to do this for to come into
The
compliance?
plumbing code was in place at that time, but there is not a state backflow prevention ordinance. All there is a state DNR rule that says all water providers must have a backflow prevention policy and ordinance. So no, there wasn't any real requirement other than the plumbing code that would require them to minimize their cross connections on their.
Is that what we're attempting to get into compliance with now, or there's a new law?
We are attempting to get in compliance with the existing state law, the state Georgia DNR rules and regulations that have been in place for years,
Okay,
that
so what's-
our existing policy and existing ordinance did not address properly.
Okay, so those rules were in place by the
The,
state.
the rules of the state required us to have a
The
back.
county was not enforcing it, so the people bought the residential meter and a residential backflow preventer thinking they were in compliance.
And because we didn't have a written policy that said anything different, we couldn't make them do anything different.
So now if we pass this ordinance and say, well, people's got to come into compliance, they've already bought it one time thinking that they paid.
And they certainly were in compliance with the existing policy, or lack thereof.
I don't think you can go back. I don't think you can go back. I hate to spend $23,000, but if you buy something and you don't have the ordinance to do something else, and they do everything they're supposed to do, 2 years later, you don't make them go back and spend some more money on something.
Basically, it's
that's-
costing us $23,000 for not having a policy.
For us to get in compliance.
Right. I mean, essentially, that's what we're saying.
That's what it is.
Because we didn't do this 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, or 10 years ago when we first put together our water
$1
system.
that's just, yeah.
And that
That's-
could be cheap versus if we would have had a problem somewhere that we can.
We could have very easily been held liable for any backflow event that occurred and sickened people on our property, or on our water system.
Well, I hate to spend the money, but you know where it comes from, but I can't in good conscience pass an ordinance and make people come back and spend money that they've already spent.
And there's a couple of these that I was involved in construction of, and I know they were built to the plan.
So,
It's different if this was a new state law that we were having it now.
It wouldn't exist
That's what I
as
mean,
then.
yeah.
But we didn't have anything. They did, but they did everything they were supposed to do as far as the county.
Our state law.
It's just because our ordinance and policy were
So we need to.
defective, for lack of a better word.
I think the board's kind of all in agreement here, it sounds like that we don't need to make this retroactive and, on the existing.
Well, we need to make it retroactive because they need to comply with the policy, but it's a question of whether or not we fund it or they fund it.
Making them pay for it.
And that's the board's choice, I certainly understand.
Is it your intent to, upon us approving this, you're gonna go and initiate this and have this brought up? So you're gonna.
We
we're not gonna
will,
just wait
once
until
the
we have to
board,
spend the money to do
once
it?
the board approves a budget amendment to place that money to cover this in there, yes, we will go ahead and procure the actual backflow preventers and procure a contractor to install.
It appears that there's only one that has nothing.
That's correct. There's only one that is an active connection that is used on a daily basis. That's correct.
So it needs to be taken care of.
That's obviously the very, very number one priority needs to be done tomorrow, if at all possible.
And how did that one come to have nothing?
Well, it wasn't for lack of effort on my part, but
See, that's a different story.
it's a political matter, and I'd rather not.
I understand, but
get
that's a
into
different story. This
how
is
that
a
particular
different- this is
person
the person
got away
that
with
We were requiring backflow preventers.
It was a disputed item on their plans, and they disputed it, and they brought it up with their previous board member, and I'd rather not, unless you really want me to drag it out of me, I'll
I'm just glad you said previous board member, I'm glad we got that straight.
How much money is that one gonna cost?
that one,
It's a
about $3,000, $3,500-ish. That's a 3-inch double check valve. And that's just material, the labor will be a little extra on top of that.
But
Do we have a policy in place that,
So basically, for this, you need us to approve this policy, so we get in compliance. And then you'll bring back to our agenda the money to spend on those items that we approve this and that we're gonna pay for.
I would assume that finance would bring you a budget amendment.
and you could do it in any number of ways. You don't have to necessarily do them all. They obviously, the
Right.
unprotected
We don't have to
ones are
solve
critical.
that,
The
right?
others
That's what I'm
are
saying.
not
Yeah.
exactly what they should be, but they are protected, so they can certainly be done later also. And there's probably enough money within the current budget, if you wanted to fund this one now, then we could do an amendment later to replace that money. So the budget works out. Not all of them, not 23,000, but 3,000, 3,500 dollars for the unprotected.
So would the right motion be to approve the second reading of this ordinance today with the understanding of this board that the unprotected or underprotected services will be funded up to a maximum of $23,000?
I don't think you're gonna get this done in $20,000.
I certainly wouldn't hurt if you wanted to boost that item so that we're safe. I mean, we're certainly not asking for a budget amendment today. If you want to,
3/4 inch ones, not a good deal, but these 6 inches and 4 inches, I think you're going, that's going to count it quick. I think 10 is very conservative.
I don't disagree. If you want to set a maximum, you can set it at a higher amount, and we'll come back to you, obviously, with a budget amendment to break down the actual details of exactly what it will cost.
I think the 14 you can get done for $200 to $300 a piece.
There's more than 14 on this list, though.
There are 14 plus 4 plus 1. So that's
The 14 are
19.
the residential double
14.
checks that need to be or dual checks need to be a double check. And
correct. Or RPC.
Or RPC, depending on
Right.
the application. Then there are 6 unprotected of what you said,
Actually-
one has nothing, the other are bypass meters or bypass.
Right, there are 4 actual bypass. We did determine that the Goshen Public Safety Building is properly protected. But there are 3 fire lines, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. 3 bypass lines and 1 fire line that would need to be addressed. But they're not used on a daily basis, so it's not as if they're as quite as problematic as the
bypass
one.
lines are not, they're valved off, right?
Correct, right, exactly. I mean, they're only used occasionally, and the same thing with fire line. I mean, it's not
At school. So
correct. I mean, they're basically there for the purposes of getting around the
changing out
meter
the
and changing out the meter and that sort of thing. That's exactly right. They're not used on a daily basis, not a high priority item.
So are you proposing that we need to update those with double check?
Yes, the ordinance and the policy as written require bypass lines to have the same level of protection as the main line. Because it can, I mean, even if it's only be used for a couple hours, that could be the couple hours that there is an event that causes exposure, right? It causes backflow. So, I mean, it has to be protected at the same level. It's just not as high a priority as the one that's used every day.
If we know that we're taking responsibility because we didn't have a requirement, do we have to make a dollar amount today when we don't really have an amount, but we know that they're going to do the work as according to what's necessary?
I think what we could do is I think we could go ahead and approve a dollar amount and do them in priority of exposure
It's perfectly fine.
until that runs out.
Whatever you guys.
Some of these are not real high risk.
Correct.
And then let them go ahead and protect the ones that, like the one that has nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an industry, if any of them have exposure to something coming in the line, that would be the one that would be the most exposed.
Let's come up with an amount and do it.
Well, personally, I'd like to see, if the ordinance is passed, the second reading, I would like to see a limit put on of 23,000, if that's where we feel like your department's going to have to go out and get bids, and bring it back to us to award that. That's $23,000. You're not
If-
going to just spend it.
If you want to do it all at one time, yes, or if you want to break it up.
We'll do one bid on one, bid it out as one job, like doing all of them at once.
Think you get your best price?
I agree.
Certainly, just going to take a little longer to do it that way, but that's,
We get it in compliance and you're done with it.
I would suggest you may want to do the one separate and then the rest of them together perhaps, because if we're going to do a formal bid, we're talking 30 days and, you know, an opening and all that sort of thing. So we certainly could go ahead and get that one completely unprotected one done quickly
Then we bid the rest of them out.
and bid the rest of them out together, right? I mean, if you want to do it that way
We could do regular purchasing procedures.
on the other stuff, right? No. And as much as it's only $3,500, I mean, it wouldn't be like we'd be rude going around the purchasing policy. We'd be doing what we would normally do for a $3,500 item. Right.
All right.
What about funding? Will we have funding? Where would that?
It depends. Depends on his final dollar amount and how much is in the budget and what we have to do. But he'll have to bring that back to us with a budget amendment. Am I correct?
Yes.
Sure, it's not in the budget.
This is not a budget line item. That's correct.
All right. Can I have a motion on the second reading of this ordinance and whatever stipulations you want to put with that motion?
I make a motion that we approve the second reading of the ordinance with the stipulation that we are able to make the existing repairs for up to $23,000 and that staff bring us a bid to cover that work.
All of it together or separate for the one versus the other?
With the exception that the one imminent could be done upfront.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve, you also need the policy itself approved, not just the ordinance.
The way it's written, the ordinance enables the policy. So I don't think they need to necessarily say that, but if you want them to. I mean, the ordinance very clearly claims that you must do everything in compliance with the procedures policy document.
I won't include it, so I'm saying, because policy is a separate document, if you could add that to the motion to approve the policy as well.
That certainly wouldn't hurt.
And I'll add to the motion to approve the policy as well.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
All right. We're running about 10 minutes behind already, so we have an appearance scheduled for 5:30. And I am terrible with names. Tammy Aviette. I apologize for,
That's fine. It's okay. Thank you.
I can't pronounce my own name. Mama called me, hey, you for so long, I can't get it straight.
No, that was fine. Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm here tonight because I sent Mr. Kiefer some pictures of the state of Highway 21, and just one section in particular, but can provide many examples of the state of the highway the day after the crew came through, the maintenance crew came through and cut the grass and maintained the highway there. And the very day after, as you can see, do you have those pictures?
Yeah.
They have them, okay. That's how the highway was left. And so I have been expressing my concerns for almost 8 years now since I've been a resident of Effingham County, and have not been able to really get any answers to my understanding as to who is responsible for maintaining our highways and what the expectations are, what we can expect as residents to see that, we have some pride in our highways and that they're being maintained appropriately. I understand there's budget constraints. I know there's little money that we have to spread, in a lot of different ways. But what I don't understand is that when we are entitled to our rotation, and they come through and they cut the grass and they do what they're supposed to do, that's how they leave it. And there must have been 8 gentlemen there. Mr. Kiefer was one, about 4 weeks or so ago, maybe more or less, out in front of the gas station there by Kroger, and showed them these pictures and expressed the concerns again. And then a couple days later, I go out there and the grass is halfway cut again. And when I called to inquire about it and said, oh, well, why did you come back and cut it, and why wasn't it still not done correctly? And the answer I got was, because you complained. So I just really need to understand so that I can take back to my neighbors, and we need to understand what can we expect as far as our highways being maintained, and why is it left in the condition that it is when we are graced with a rotation.
Who will we discuss this with?
So I have copies of emails that go back to 2007. I can give you a long list of names that I've spoken with. Spoken with C.R. Jackson. I've spoken with John Wentworth. I've spoken and met with Ron Nelson many times. I just have a long list of names that I can give you if you'd like, but
Who are
it's
those
goes.
people? Are they with Georgia DOT or they?
DOT.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so just to mention, originally, as a little bit of background information, as far as when I came on the board at least, that is a state highway. So the Georgia DOT is ultimately the responsible party for that state highway. However, we did vote for us to start cutting the grass because it was, I went out there and took pictures myself, it was about waist, it was literally waist high. And it just was never being cut in any kind of way. So we did start the rotation, but I agree with you. I think they go out there and they cut it, and then they leave, and there isn't, because it hasn't been maintained for so long, or because they don't go often enough, it's kind of like, hey, when they do cut it. And so I don't know if we can get in a little bit tighter rotation, and I don't know, and I'm gonna have to ask Toss as far as, is there any weeding and things like that done, because it doesn't appear that at all.
Well,
Well,
if just holding the, Phil, who all was out there? She said about 8 people. I'm just
Austin
trying.
is better with names with DOT than I am, but
It was Ron Nelson, Ron Ivory. I don't remember the gentleman's name. I've never met him before. He was with their grass cutting division, I guess. That's Mr. Kiefer, myself,
So
and
DOT.
Melvin Johnson.
Okay. Now, and part of this now is actually because I've observed the city of Rankin being out there doing some maintenance right in front of Kroger.
Yes.
Because now that Rankin is annexed, part of this now falls in the city limits of Rankin.
Well, our agreement was from the county line to Goshen Road. So between Goshen Road and Kroger was not within our
Okay.
agreement with the GDOT.
So we actually have an
We have a
agreement.
mowing and maintenance agreement, yes, sir.
Okay. So it doesn't fall on GDOT, it falls on the county.
Between the county line and Goshen Road, yes, sir.
County line and Goshen Road. See, I'm trying to figure out where the liability is to answer the original question, so I can
We
see.
stop at Goshen Road, so this is not,
Yeah.
this is not part of it.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. I just told you, it is to the county, to the city line, to the city limits. Our public works goes to Goshen Road. We have the prison crew go from Goshen Road to the city limits, because from Goshen Road to the city limits is all those narrow medians. We can't really get those tractors in there.
Gotcha.
So public works does it. And to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what they used to do with, whether it's a weed eater or push mower or sickle. I truly don't know.
And I'm certainly not going to defend something that I don't know about, but I will tell you, this year has been an exceptionally hard year to keep.
now, again, though, this is a DOT road, this is something we've dealt with in the past. And the board, when you start taking over DOT mowing, it actually was different for the city. They don't have to sign a multi-year agreement like the county has to. And it was like a 50-year agreement for us, right? Something like that. And so when we agreed to start mowing some of that down there to supplement what the DOT has been doing, that's over and above what we have to do. Now, we did it because of the complaints and because it is the entrance to the county. But, you know, to put it in perspective, this is the only section of the DOT road that we mow. We don't mow anything north of Rankin or anything in the north end of the county. So, you know, I think that if we start getting to the point where we're out there managing this section of road, we're going to have a lot more complaints from people in other areas of the county that we're doing absolutely nothing. So, again, this is a DOT issue, and this will be one benefit of the city of Rankin moving their city limits out. That section that we're actually talking about here will most likely be picked up in their mowing program.
But there are areas in which our crews from the prison do maintenance for Springfield and other cities, is that right?
They usually make labor.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
use
just like we
them.
do.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we get reimbursed? But we get nothing back from GDOT for doing it. So it's just a county expense for a limited section of the county.
Yes, sir.
The state, the last couple of years, they don't mow the grass on the state highway, but maybe twice.
It just wasn't getting done at all. We were trying to help.
They usually cut
But
twice
DOT
and spray
did,
once.
they did come and spray, I believe, so they still are doing some things on the sections that we're cutting. They're, you know, I forget what they call that, they're not trying to kill the grass, they're trying to slow it.
Retard
Yeah, retard it, that's right.
May I also
It needs that.
say also that what we're concerned about, and if you can see in the pictures that I took, there are drainage grates right there in some of those areas. And so we are wondering if when they are cutting the grass like that, and we were told that it's not their responsibility to pick it up, that all that dirt and all that grass is going down into those grates, those drainage grates. So is that impacting drainage somewhere down the line? Can that be an issue at some point?
I would say it would be.
That's what we're concerned about as well. So not just because it's not being maintained, but what's it doing? What's the effects of it?
But like I said, I know the city of Rankin, because that had their emblems on the trucks, was there, that area in front of Kroger, all that.
I'm not sure how.
Were they going all the way to the,
Chimney, maybe?
I don't know.
I don't know, I didn't see it.
The units behind the frontage of Chimney, they left all those buildings in that front out. Basically the church is what they did.
All right.
I see the concerns, I think it's,
Yeah, I believe Ms. Avier's concerns are not just the regularity of the mowing, but the results after the mowing, because I think Commissioner Jones stated it gets so high, it's almost like baking hay. You know, when you get done, and there's just large amounts of grass that are left behind. And what prison crews have not done is picked all that back up and hauled it off. Now, they have started mowing it with more regularity every 2 weeks. Every week, which ultimately will help, which is why Rankin's and Springfield does a lot better, because it's never allowed to get waist high. So if we can ever get it down and then keep it down, I believe that will largely resolve itself, whether it completely goes away or not. And then the litter control portion of it, Ms. Avier expressed concern with too, with cigarette butts and paper and things, you know, left on the side of the roads and so forth.
I know that this, somebody can't be there to monitor 24 hours, 7 days a week, but is there a way we can have some sort of litter signs in that area also with some sort of, warning that people will be fined if they're caught throwing their cigarette butts is litter, litter's litter. And I know it's probably, swimming against the current there, but anything that can help.
Probably are. I was sitting behind the Chatham County officer one day, and there's a no litter sign right there, and he flicks a cigarette butt out.
Yeah.
So
It's sad.
how much good does that do?
Well,
And then you've got all the things with signs that can impede vision and things like that, so.
Well, additionally, this is a state right. We can't place signs on
We
state right.
can't.
We can
Oh,
certainly
okay.
make a request to the DOT to do so, but it's not our right to do so.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've started doing with some more regularities. Is that true? Have you noticed it getting improved?
No,
So
sir.
you're saying no?
No. And I will tell you also, there's been 3 times that I know of where I have gotten on the phone and complained about it because I'm leaving for work and I see a huge, huge snake. So there's a safety issue there too, because when that grass gets up really high, and I know you can't control snakes, I'm just telling you that doesn't help either.
What about my garage? There was one laying right there in the
Yeah.
garage, so there was no grass there. So
Okay.
usually looking for a cool spot. But
but it's a huge balancing act, obviously, that we have. If we could do everything that everybody asks us to do, and had unlimited money, we would enjoy doing that. But we have that balancing act we have, because the funds to do anything that we do has to come from somewhere. And when it comes to a state road, I'm wishing that we know more of the state road. But I understand that we can't, because we just don't have the money to do it without taking money from some other program or levying taxes on it.
Well, I understand that, and as I said in the beginning, I understand that there's, limited funds to spread in a lot of different ways, but why, when we are on the rotation, can it not be done correctly? Those pictures clearly show that doesn't happen. That's my issue. If we're only on a rotation every so often, it is what it is because there's no money to do it any more often. But why can't it be done correctly? That's my point as well.
Now, when it's mowed, are you, how's the right way to ask? Are you wanting it to look like you cut it with your lawnmower? Or whenever they come out and mow it with a bush hog type of machine, it's never gonna look like a lawnmower cutting.
Well, is that acceptable, the pictures that I showed you? Are those acceptable results for a cutting? Would you accept that?
This is a cut here.
One of the
The
That-
picture I got is just still tall growth.
yeah, one of the things.
There were, I sent many pictures that
And
showed.
that's what I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to achieve, because I don't think you're going to get to a lawnmower cut.
I'm not asking that, but
Not
there, if you could,
Not a manicure,
I think it's.
Not manicured, I'm not saying-
Where there's growth and build up in the
but
gutters.
there's one picture right here that clearly illustrates the section that needs to be sprayed so that stuff dies and never comes back. That's between concrete and concrete. That shouldn't even just be there.
Well, it
That
happens.
was pretty bad.
Hopefully that's something over time that
And that's-
we can
that's
take
the
it,
case.
just a small step every time we come and try to get it to a point we can start maintaining.
But that's the point, is that we went so long without it being cut at all.
Yeah,
It's so out of whack that it'll take time to do.
and the medians are very narrow, and I understand that you can't get lawnmowers and bush hogs and things like that in there. And even if you do it with a weed eater, why is, there's one section. Isn't this, if you're gonna do a weed eater, cut it right across evenly. It's just not, whoever is managing or watching the crews, it's just, okay, we were here, bye. That's really what's happening. We made our appearance.
Well, you coming and help me to understand who's in charge of this particular section of road. So maybe we can put a little more attention to.
Again, overall, the county, agreed to cut between the city limits and the county line. The way that we internally decided that we could best manage that is to have public works do from Goshen back, mainly because there's it's where the road splits back out, there's median or shoulders and a larger grass median. But through this particular section, we didn't think that public works could have the adequate equipment to do it, because we do it with larger mowers, and in these medians, it would just be a little serious.
And to go forward, I think a discussion needs to be held with Rankin to find out just exactly what their participation is going to be now that they're doing their annexation.
We can, Wesley mentioned that the other day, that he wanted to start in that way. I didn't ask him how far he was willing to come, but I'll be more willing to do so.
Well, I think that's a discussion we need to have so we can help to figure out the end result.
Now, obviously, they cut theirs with lawnmowers, X marks, and
Yeah.
so forth, in the median.
And
But
really,
they're a little
what
wide too, they're not as narrow as these. I don't believe you can get any sort of,
And
maybe a
again,
push mower.
the way I remember it, the DOT was a lot more lenient with the city mowing with a lawnmower than they were with the county.
They don't require
They-
any agree with the city.
That's right, they didn't require all the safety and error boards and such as that.
Yes, sir.
Why that is, I don't know.
But it's a lot cheaper for this little X mark out there and got it and maintain it with a mower than it is. for
Well,
us to
I don't
do all
know
the time.
exactly, we need to check on what the prison's using, they certainly have access to those. Now, I don't know if they're using it here, what crew it is, if it's a regular crew, if there's different crews, what particular work detail it is, but we can certainly ask the warden those questions.
Yes.
And we'll certainly follow up. Again, it was what he has told us, that he was going to begin to cut weeds, I don't know that one, I truly don't.
And when it rains 47 days in a row, it's tough.
Yes, sir.
The once weekly rotation that we discussed was also from Rankin city limits to the guardrails south of Goshen that need, hand work around there, plus the right of ways on the other side. So it is a fairly expansive space in a week.
Which means they probably aren't covering the entire thing in
Every
one
week.
day, they'll probably, take some multiple days. And again, we'll check, I don't go that way, so I'm not.
Well, thank you for bringing it to the board's attention. I know you already had 8 people and sounds like a lot of conversation, but maybe we can get everybody together and see if we can't do a little better.
Okay, and
Okay?
may I expect to hear back from someone, or should we just what kind of follow-up, or just watch and see what happens, is that?
I would say you need to watch and see what happens.
Okay.
And if it's not suitable, don't fit.
Thank you for your time.
All right. See how volunteers you are. I'm good with that. That's your business. All right. Still running a little behind here. We have Walter Fail.
I'm Walter Fail.
Hello, Mr. Fail.
Well, we're still wondering what to do with this road issue we got here. It's washing more. If we get a hurricane next month, like they say, you're gonna hit every 6 years because we didn't have one last month. We get 2 more inches of rain, the road's gone, everybody's stuck like Chuck. And I mean, even, I'm gonna provide dirt, to fix it with or whatever. But this is gonna take time. All this is gonna take time. And the road's gonna be closed, to fix it. How's anybody gonna get out? What somebody have a heart attack or something, what's Lifestar gonna fly in? They gonna rappel down from the helicopter? My wife's got a heart condition. I got a heart condition. What's gonna happen? We have a medical emergency back there and can't get out. And it's going to be a road issue for years to come until, it's going to be an eminent domain, going to have to be done and county road put in. And then everybody be happy and it'll be nice and flat and we won't have to go through hills
At least one person won't be happy with that.
hills and dales. Well,
Mr. Fail, I think we heard all of y'all's arguments before, and it's the direction of staff to look at this and see what the record shows. I'm going to make a statement. Certainly any other commissioner is willing to speak their minds on this, but it's, after a review of staff, it's the opinion that is a private road. And this is not a county road, and that this is a civil matter. And I know that it's easy to say that we can use an eminent domain and go across somebody else's property and build a road. But I, for one, am not in favor of going. There's easements recorded in deeds, from what I understand. There's people that have bought property there with these easements in place. And while I am not going to pretend to be an attorney, and this staff is not trying to pretend to be an attorney, I think it is our staff's opinion that this is a private road and a civil matter. Any other commissioner is welcome to make a statement, but I think that's the
same thing you have.
if I'm not speaking for this board, please speak up.
Well, did staff, was there anything whatsoever about this being a county road or maintained by the county at any time?
There's a road maintenance agreement for this property owner that says that they will maintain an easement along here.
Which is the road coming
Which is
out?
the road, yes, sir, that's in question. There is a maintenance agreement that specifies that it is a private road to be maintained by.
I think that one's fairly clear that there is an access easement through there. It's the other one that's the one in question.
The one this way, we could find nothing that would state that there ever was or should have been access across this property.
well, I got the plat from 1972. That was surveyed. And it shows the road coming from Tommy Long. It shows it coming right down the power line, makes the turn right where the gate is, comes across 150 foot, connects with the 80-acre field, which is my grandfather, and it shows the road going straight to my house. I mean, that's where it was, and before this plat, I couldn't tell you how many years it's been there. 50, 60, 70, 80. It was there a long time, and that was the way in and out for my uncles, myself. Before this other road was put in 1975. I was already back here prior to 1975. I used this road all my life. Whenever somebody bought in, you know, they didn't want the road here. They just, you know, made it go somewhere else. And it still goes back there. And there's nothing wrong with it. Except it's got a gate across it. That's the only thing. And nobody can get through.
So that's where it becomes a civil matter. I don't think it's ever been a county road, and I don't think this board is willing to make it a county road and don't have the rights to do so.
So this is the last avenue of remedy with the county, I understand.
Unless some of this board says otherwise, I would say that's the feeling of this board.
All right. Well, there's no use in wasting breath.
Can I say something? Approach that. You may.
Sure.
I'm kind of confused with the whole thing. Y'all said somebody has this, it says on somebody's deed or easement that they're responsible for taking care of the road. Is that what y'all are saying?
There are easements in some of the deeds on some of that property that were granted to people for access,
This is a road from the boat.
but that doesn't make it a county road. That's an easement.
I thought y'all said somebody was on their deed was saying they were responsible for maintaining the road.
They are. It's not on their deed,
Well,
but there is a document.
who is that?
It was apparently a former owner. Yeah.
Well, it was assumed by Mr. Farley, Milton Farley.
Who?
Milton Farley.
Really?
This was an agreement that was filed in the Superior Court Clerk's Office July 23rd, 2012. In deed book 2112, page 474, in which it clearly states the access easement is a privately maintained road solely for the purpose of ingress to the aforementioned property, that any maintenance and upkeep and cost of the privately maintained road, so long as it shall be used for the benefit of this property, shall be maintained and paid for by the property owner, Richard W. Wright, Jr., to be assumed by the new property owner, Milton R. Farley. Said access easement is to be maintained in its current condition. Milton R. Farley is the new owner of the property, does agree to all the terms and conditions of this road maintenance agreement.
All right, that answers the question. Thank you.
I'd like to speak, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Donna Farley. And
Get up to the microphone, please.
yeah, I'm Mrs. Donna Farley. So when we purchased this home, we were given this grant that you just talked about, and we were told that this maintenance was strictly, and this was something that was supposed to be done with all property owners in the area, not just us. This was supposed to be something that everyone was responsible for the maintenance of this road. Am I being told now that I'm supposed to put in a new road?
We're
Not by us.
not, we're not telling you anything. We're telling you this is a civil matter, and as far as this county, it's not a county road for us to maintain. I think you just bought this, and I asked you if you got title insurance.
Yes.
You need to be talking to your attorney and your title company.
And so if I go to my title insurance and explain to them that this entire easement situation was before my time and now it's absolutely a nightmare, you're telling me they're going to let me out of this, or how does that work?
I am not giving you legal advice, ma'am. I'm telling you that's probably your best avenue to pursue. Because it is a question on your title, so you have title insurance. I'm just telling you that I would suggest that you go to the closing attorney and explain it and pursue that with them. But it's a civil matter. It has nothing to do with this board.
All right.
So sorry.
It's not our desires.
No. Okay.
This is very similar to Haddon Lake Road.
Now can we talk about you guys? Does skip anything else?
New business one.
Good. All right. Is Mr. Kale here? Mr. Kale, I'm going to make a statement to you. This board is not going to take this up at this time. We need to talk about this. Is it my understanding that you actually contacted ACCG for reimbursement?
No, she called and left me a message and wanted to talk about the claim. I didn't call her.
But have you made a claim against the county in some way?
No, I'm just seeking repair of my car.
Okay.
The county filed a claim for ACCG. We actually filed that claim.
Since this is pending litigation, we need to discuss this in executive session, and then we can come back.
How is this pending litigation?
Pending referral claim, it's a claim with our insurance carrier, it's been presented to them, I think.
I've told you this for days here. I don't, Mr. Kale has yet to say anything about hiring an attorney. He wants to present this to us, and I, for one, don't think that this is executive session discussion.
Okay. Is there something in addition to what was presented to us at our last meeting?
There was some information that we was going to try to find out from Public Works, right?
Well, I'm confused because it's an item on our agenda, and I had no idea it was going to be considered as litigation, and then it says under the recommendations that we did, it looks like Public Works did actually take some action that might have caused a problem, and that was not in our last package.
Well, actually,
No, it was not. That's when Mr. Taylor brought that up at the last meeting. I in fact, asked.
I think this board is getting dangerously out on a limb right here. I think we need to have this discussion. in
first, let's
executive
clarify
session.
that this wasn't an agenda item previously. Mr. Kale stuck around in discussion.
That's right.
That's right. So we didn't table.
You're right.
That's right.
It's an agenda item for today that we approved, is what I'm saying.
And
And I'm asking that we put this off until after executive session.
I need to be clarified why this is pending litigation.
Is a pending or is a threatened claim that's been presented to our insurance carrier, and we now have notice a claim for damage to a vehicle. I think it's a critical type of claim that we would want to hear executive session about.
Well, I just think that should have been addressed at agenda time, right?
I don't hear the agenda, John, I don't see them, so
Do you not review them? You're not reviewing our agenda?
I review the agenda after they're printed. I don't take part in putting together the agenda.
That was actually discussed in Ms.
I'm not
Johnson.
removing this from an agenda. I'm asking that we discuss it in executive session, come back out, and we will move this down, and we will bring this back out.
You can actually take action later time.
That's what I'm
And then take
saying.
action on it.
But what,
Which is,
Okay.
why would it be litigation?
It has nothing to do with the merits of this. What I'm saying is, how do we discuss this in executive session when there has been no threat and there is no pending litigation? That's what I'm still unclear on.
Well, and Chairman Fisher, I'll say what I'm asking is if you feel that this is information that only needs to be discussed in executive session due to litigation for our own protection, the fact that it's on our agenda now makes this an open record document anyway, is it not? So here it
That
is.
report is a public record document, but, I will tell you, there are other cases where there have been developments involving pothole cases that I would like the board to hear about in executive session, apart from this one, where there is pending litigation. I'd like the board to hear about those cases before you make a decision.
But did those people come to the county wanting, threaten to sue them, or what? This gentleman has, he just told us what happened. He hadn't said he was gonna hire a lawyer or anything else, so I don't see where we get into
We
litigation.
presented a claim to our insurance company.
He didn't do that.
I think, and where I'm tripping over this is I think Mr. Kale's just gonna ask us, are we willing to pay the bill?
And I think you need information, I know that can be provided to you in executive session that will give you the information that you need to make a reasonable decision.
But
See, I don't understand because it's pretty cut and dry. The county cut the ditch and I ran into it. They didn't put up any signs. There were no barriers. There was no barrels. I have an expensive sports car, and if I listed the number of things that are important to me, this thing would be at the top. And I hate driving it. It pains me to drive it on a dirt road.
How long was the dirt road good?
It's like a mile and a half.
To clarify this a little bit, you remember all the discussion we was having, all the problems I was having in the north end of the county with the logging operation? He's right in the middle of that. And one of the roads, there were two ways to go out from where they live. One was closed, but it was just impassable.
It was closed. I had no alternative to go to work. And when I went through this place in the road, I was going like walking speed. I did not want to splash mud on my car. I just washed it. And so I'm like going barely fast enough to get the tire back up on the other side of the ditch. Now, I mean, I don't understand how this could be any more cut and dry. The county cut the ditch and I ran into it. There were no warnings, no signs.
Did we ever clarify that we did cut it?
All right.
Is that a definite?
I'm telling you,
That's the discussion we want to have.
I'm telling you, I want to move this after executive session. Are y'all gonna let me do it or not? That's the question. Because if you're gonna go ahead and have the discussion, I'm gonna tell you, you're getting out you're gonna put yourself in a limb.
I think we're putting ourselves on the limb by talking of, if we go in executive session and discuss this particular issue.
I didn't say we were
Now
gonna
we're
discuss
on-
this issue. We've got something else that I think you need to hear that's basically unrelated to this that will help you to make a decision in this one. Would that
Well,
be a
I'd sure
fair
like to hear
statement?
that too.
Okay.
You have.
I am not saying we go in and discuss this.
Involving pothole claims, and I think y'all need to hear what has occurred in this case. You can factor that information into your decision.
So you want to delay this to later?
I'll have to
Delay this until after executive
I'll make a
session.
motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation, personnel, and property. Now. Then we can do it. Then Mr. Kell doesn't have to wait. We'll go into executive session now.
I'll second that.
Sure. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So adjourned. Into executive.
Okay, you're good.
Call the meeting back to order. Mr. Kale, sorry to leave you. So you, it's my understanding from the information that we got and what you presented to us last meeting, on 7/17/2013, about 9:19 in the morning, you drove your sports car down a dirt road through a ditch
It's
that
actually-
you say was dug by the county, doing about $900 and something worth of damage to your car, correct?
9:26, and it was about 7:30 when I drove through.
$126.25.
Yes, sir,
And you were asking the county to reimburse you for that.
I am.
Is your car covered by insurance?
It is
Do you have a deductible?
$250.
Would it be fair to say that your insurance company would pay all but $250 of this claim?
They would. I really wouldn't want to file it with them, but I'm sure they would. It would just be another claim on my insurance that I wouldn't like that.
Another claim?
Well, I mean, a while back, my daughter was hit by a deer, but I don't think that counts. I've been with,
That deer ran right out and hit her, did it?
oh, actually ran into her, big buck, and did
How did that happen?
$7,900 worth of damage. So I'm thinking USAA is not real happy about that, but
Okay. So.
Mr. Kell, you want, the one we just say, tell us what happened? Mr. Kell, just tell us what happened.
you want to hear what
and the
happened?
process of what happened to why you had damage to your vehicle.
You know, I went through the ditch a couple of times. It was sloped the days before. And this just happened to be one of the days that my wife and I both had to drive, and she took the excursion like she usually does. You know, it could have been, if raining that bad, I would hate to take my sports car on that road. We both would have been in the excursion. But unfortunately, I had to drive that day, and the ditch was not the same as it was the day before.
Had there been more rain?
There was rain, there was more rain, and, you know, but it was a pretty steady thing going across the road, like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 feet wide. So I got to it, and it looked a little bit different than it did the day before, and so I slowed down till I stopped. And then I decided I was going to go through it, and I was at basically walking speed, just enough to get my tires on the other side of that ditch when I went through it. But apparently the nose of the sports car is low, and it hit the other side of the ditch and poked a hole in it.
Had you driven the car the day before?
Yes.
So did this happen between the day before and the evening and 7:30 in the morning?
This happened at 7:30 on the 17th.
In the morning?
In the morning.
And you're saying that they did the work from the day before in the evening and the morning, the next morning?
I don't know exactly when they cut the ditch.
Do they work at night typically?
I don't know exactly when they cut the ditch. My neighbor told me that they had done that.
But you went through it the 16th that afternoon, right?
No, we're actually trying to figure out other ways to get to our house. And so I went the 5-mile route down Old Augusta Road, and it was not any much better. It was like, I almost got stuck 3 or 4 times coming the back way. So I didn't go down the road in the evening.
Okay.
There was water standing in the ditch when you went through it?
Yes.
Does it stand or flow?
I'm sorry?
Does it actually flow across the road or just?
No, it was flowing across the road.
Is it possible that the county could have cut this swale and the flowing water could have cut that out and created a deeper ditch than what the county might have left it thinking it was?
I don't know. I don't know. It would have to be a serious amount of rain to cut a ditch. I mean, it was a swale, and then it was down at the bottom of it. It was that deep. I don't know what kind of water that would take, and I think it would have still cut it in more of a swale across the whole thing instead of an abrupt drop off.
And you don't know how much it rained the night before?
I'm not real sure, no.
This email from Doug X of this statement, was that sent to the board? Stephanie, did that get put in everybody's package?
I'm sorry.
The statement from
I
Doug
sent
X?
it to you. I didn't know how to send it to the board.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. It was sent to me. That's a statement from Doug Exley, a resident up there. Doug Exley states, I can forward this email if you want to print it. Let's do
What does it say?
read it.
You got it in our book, right?
The email from Doug Exley? I think it's the other one.
Doug X, my name.
Okay, go over here and I'll read it. This is from Doug Exley, my resident up there. So on the morning of the 17th of July 17th, I heard equipment operating on Porter's Landing Road and Old Augusta Road. County Road Department has been working on the roads because of heavy rains that we received over the past few weeks, and I've been out earlier to see what progress has been made. I I discovered that the road crew had dug a ditch across Porter's Landing Road just before the first curve from Titusville Road. Water had been running across the road there for several days. I drove across as I had done the day before, not knowing that the ditch had been dug with a motor grader. There were no signs warning the public that the ditch had been dug. I went across the ditch in my truck, and it was quite a drop off. But the truck made it through because it was high enough off the ground on the bottom out. I went back to my house and later received a call from my wife who had talked to Mike Kell, my neighbor, who told her that he had hit the ditch across the road on the way to work that morning. She told me of the damage to his car and then drove to the corner of Porter's Landing and Old Augusta, where the road crew was working, and talked to the crew foreman. I told him of the damage to Mr. Kell's car and advised him that he needed to put up warning signs on the road on both sides of the ditch. Also advised him to put out warning signs whenever they were working on the roads. He said Mr. Kell was at fault for traveling too fast for conditions. I also advised that a culvert be placed where the ditch was dug to allow water to drain properly. He said that the county would not put a culvert in because there was no money available in the budget for that expense. Later that afternoon, warning signs were put up. I know that the department has been stretched thin the last few months because of the rain. However, citizen safety should be first and foremost. Most fortunate for injured. So Mr. Exley states that he was out there with the road crew on the morning of the 17th. Is that the day?
That's the day that I got the damage. That's the day I went through it, yes.
So I guess the question is, how did this ditch get created? I guess is the $900 question here.
How did you get your car out, Mr. Gates?
Well, it didn't get stuck. I got it across the ditch and
Went on across?
I went on across.
It looks like it folded the bumper cover underneath the car, so it looks like it's forward, air down sort of thing.
Yep.
That's what the quote is to repair.
Right.
So obviously the county gets what we call pothole claims quite often. And pothole claims, in my opinion, are just that. It's claims that somebody's had damage because it was potholes. Well, obviously we have that all the time. We have potholes that create, and we try to get them as soon as possible. It's much like a tree blowing across the road. Obviously, if a tree gets blown down, the county, we're going to have somebody out there as soon as possible to get it up, but there is some time that there's exposure that tree's there that somebody could hit. And I don't think anybody would disagree that in that case, that's not, the county shouldn't be liable for that. However, in my opinion, if somehow we did something to push that tree down in the road, then I think that changes. The question that we had when Mr. Kell brought this to us last was, when did and what did the road department do out there on the site? Because I believe, in my opinion, if this was a ditch that was created for water running across the road, Mr. Kell will have to take us up with his insurance company. And so with that, Mr. Allen, you checked into some of this. What did you find out from the road department?
The only thing we really found out is we didn't have any logs definitively telling us that. Mr. Tucker thought that they may have done the work prior to this, or post this incident after it occurred. And I don't know, reading back through the initial stuff that Mr. Kell sent, and really the email that you just read from Mr. Exley, I think both acknowledge the fact that water had been flowing across the road for several weeks prior to this particular incident happening. And if it had, Mr. Kell also stated that he went through the ditch the evening before, and Mr. Exley said that he heard equipment working the morning of the 17th. The police report says that as they were coming out, Public Works was arriving on the scene. So Public Works came after Mr. Kell hit the hole, in which Mr. Exley says they created. I don't know. It appears that Public Works did what they did after this incident, but we don't have anything written down to definitively say that.
Well, if Mr. Kell has insurance and he filed a claim and that insurance company felt that the county was at fault, would they not make claim against the county?
They could.
hoping for, Commissioner Mason, was actually their work logs that said the date at which they did that. And all their logs basically say that they were on Porter's Lane Road, and they had been there for some time before, again, as indicated in several of these correspondence. What the nature of what they were doing, unfortunately, I don't know. That's what we were trying to ascertain.
So when you went home the afternoon of the 17th, did you drive through the same section of road?
I believe I did. Did-
Yes, sir. Just come to the podium, please. State your name.
I don't really remember now.
I thought that was the afternoon that you said you took the 5 miles.
No, I'm
Nope.
Cheryl Kale, I'm his wife. The day before, on the 16th, we had been coming home Dials Landing, which is our 2 ways of coming home. On the afternoon of the 6th, on this morning of the 16th, we saw that Dials Landing was closed due to logging. Okay, that's our second way. So on the way home on this afternoon of the 16th, we decided, well, there's one other way, that long way, Old Augusta Road, and let's try that way and see if that's any better than Porter's Landing, since it's, in such bad shape and Dials Landing is closed. So we came home the long way, and which I was with him on that day, and we almost got stuck several times. It was in terrible condition too. So on the 17th, when he left, we had no recourse. Dials Landing is closed due to the logging, so we went Porter's Landing. When all this happened, of course, I drove a separate vehicle after he had gone. So he calls me and told me what happened. So I called the county, the public works. First I called the police department. They said I had to call the road department. So I called, talked to somebody at the road department. She said we had to have a police report. So I called him, said call the police. So we did. And there were no signs or anything. While the police were there, the truck came up with the yellow signs in the back, and they started to put them out. And that's all I know.
So the police report, the public works showing up was...
And I think it's in the police report that Public Works was showing up as he was writing the report.
I'm wondering, did they show up to do the work on the road, or did they show up to put the signs up?
He said when he called me, he said there were signs in the back, yellow signs in the back. He did not read the signs to see what the signs said.
But
Maybe they carry them all the time. I have no idea.
But they had their road graders, and they were getting ready to do some
So that
some work on
afternoon
the
when
road.
we came home, we did drive as far as where the ditch is, and that's where they had started doing some work, and I guess they were going to put the culvert in or whatever. So he did go home that way. He came home the long way again because Dials Landing was still closed.
What bothers me is that if we had not have been there at all, if the county road department hadn't been out at all to that yet, then it would clearly be an erosion issue across the road, and it was just, I'm sorry, but you're going to file that with the insurance.
And that's exactly the way it appeared the previous 2 days. Previous 2 days, the water was making a nice little swale across the road, and it was no problem.
It wasn't fun to go across, but it was more slant, it was passable, more easily passable. Not something you want to do every day if you don't have to, but when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice.
And we don't have any way to readily know how much rain we got that previous evening.
There was a bunch. We got a bunch of rain. It was probably 1 or 2 inches. I don't know for sure.
It was the normal rains we've been having, that's all I know.
A bunch. I can't say that it really changed the flow across the road, though. That had been fairly consistent. They cut down 1,000 acres of trees, and the watershed is gone. Now the culvert is permanently running stream going through there because the water has made a new path.
So we did put a culvert in?
Oh,
The pictures that were taken, when were these pictures taken?
the morning that it happened.
He took pictures,
When I went through it,
called
there
me
was...
about calling the police. He said, I'm gonna take some pictures before they get here.
When I went through it earlier, though, there was more water. You could see where the ditch was. I could see it down there, but I couldn't tell how deep it was. But you couldn't really see that it was up and down like it was cut. I didn't.
What would they do this work with? I mean, sitting here looking at these pictures, you would think if there was heavy equipment, you would see some type of heavy equipment tracks there. I don't see anything like that.
This was, and that's a good point, but that was, another thing that's interesting in the picture is that it's rugged so bad. And that center looks like it appears to be much higher than where the traffic, where the tire is from. And that's probably what you actually hit, was one of those high spots in the photo.
If you look at that bottom photo, you can see how hard it's run across that road. I mean, it's actually really, it's floating heavy.
And it was pretty heavy before that too, but it covered the ditch. You couldn't really see it.
Public Works is saying that the first time they went out there on this road was the 17th?
No, sir. No, sir. They've been out there before. Jerry just said he thought that when they actually took the motor grader in, I think he communicated something to you. The way he described it was there was obviously in the road issue. They were trying to smooth it out so that you could get through it more easily. He thought that it was done after the morning of the 17th. But again, there's no documentation to that effect.
I would tend to agree that probably the motor grader work was done after the crash or the damage to the car. Question is, we were out in the area, and why did we not close this because it wasn't the only alternative out there?
I believe it was closed intermittently. You were sending out those notices. The question was this road not closed because it was the only way if Dial was closed? I believe it was intermittently. But Porter's was also, was it during that same time intermittently?
Which one?
Porter's Landing?
Yeah.
It was closed, periodically it was closed and reopened, but because of the only two accesses, there was, also, and like Mr. Kale said, Porter's Landing at this time, I do believe was closed.
They actually didn't close it until a few days later when they had the culverts out there, and then by that time they had fixed Dial's Landing and we could get out that way.
But had this road been closed before?
No.
Before you actually had damage?
No.
And I think the reason Commissioner Mason is because Dial's Landing was in such terrible shape.
It was awful.
They were trying to keep some form of access.
It was terrible what these folks were dealing with up there. This is the reason for this logging thing we did.
Yes.
What date did Mr. Edson say he heard equipment operating?
17.
17.
The day of.
And these photos were taken?
17.
And I can say when I followed him, after he called me a little after 8 o'clock, I was in the excursion. There was no other way out. And it was tough to get across even with something as high as the excursion. I had no choice but to go across it. But there were no road crews out there at that point in time either. And that was after 8 o'clock. So, and then the police came out. I don't know what time, whatever time's on the police report. I don't know what that is.
So are we saying that we still don't know if Public Works created the problem or not? 'Cause
All I
really
can say
don't
is
see
that
two or
yes,
three
they
now.
took a motor grader and they attempted to smooth out a depression. Whether it was done prior to Mr. Field's incident or not, no ma'am, I do not know. I believe the initial depression was caused by flowing water. At some point, they did take a motor grader and again do something to that depression. But I cannot tell you if it was done before or after the 17th. No.
And so the date that they called the day it happened in the evening, you called the next day to the Public Works Department?
No, I called the morning it happened. On the 17th, I called.
To the Public Works Department?
Mhm.
And the Public Works Department doesn't have a record as to what day they did the work when they did it?
They have records of when they went to the road. They don't, there's no description as to what work was performed when they got there.
Were they still logging during this time?
Yes. Dial's Landing was closed at that time.
But they were still logging?
Yes.
Because I'm wondering what all this traffic is on there.
Giles Landing was closed due to the logging.
I'm not even sure the trucks could get out Giles Landing, it was so bad, but, I mean, they might have been going down Porter's Landing too. I couldn't really say.
The question is this really a normal pothole claim, or does the county have any responsibility for, because we've been out there working in the area? That's, I think legally we've been told that we don't have responsibility. I think more than we do.
I could agree if I knew they did the work prior.
That is me.
Yes, I see no indication there's been motor graders and, I see a little more.
They've got
The
great.
future, I would say, the
Where they
future
had to
caveat
work.
would be that they need to keep records of what they do when they do it, so it can be accounted for.
Ma'am, I'll do it right.
But they had been working the road now, the digging out with the motor grader and trying to make it less pronounced. I don't know, when that was done, and I would think, I even may tend to believe it was afterwards that the motor grader work was done, because that's what Doug Exley said he's seen.
I'm not in construction, but all I've ever seen a motor grader do is smooth road. I've seen backhoes dig and dig. I've never seen a road.
And I believe there was, because the ditches were full of sand, there was a backhoe out there as well, I believe, and they were trying to clear, path in the ditches. I'm not sure if it was dug by a motor grader or a backhoe.
I am in the construction business, and I'm gonna tell you what a contractor would be required to do there is put in a temporary pipe or a plate across that before we left it.
Chairman, I believe the rule on these claims against counties for road defects is that if the employee had discretion, the county employees had discretion as to what to do, unless they had specific policies that address a precise situation, told them what they were required to do, and they didn't do it or they were negligent, then the county was not. The county has immunity.
Because they did have discretion here.
Because they had discretion. The most recent pronouncement was in a case against the county recently decided by the state court, where the court found that because in that case it was a deputy, and it was up to the deputy to follow. There were policies, but they left the deputy to decide whether there was a danger or not a danger. And the counties, the court ruled in favor of the county on that claim, because you are responsible for the county treasurer. These claims are not against the county, but they're against the taxpayers. The county can't be the insurer of every road defect.
All right, so the question before this board is whether to reimburse for Mr. Cale's repairs. I know the amount somewhere in here, 900 and
26, How about if we pay a deductible? I mean, we don't know, or are we not?
yeah, 926.25. If the board feels like there's a liability at all, or whether or not to pay for his deductible, or whether to deny the claim. As I see it, that's the three options.
I don't think the deductible is an option. If you're liable, then the whole thing, if you're not liable.
I'm just,
Yeah.
But there's no doubt there, what happened.
And if there's a doubt, if we both have insurance, the insurance company will look into it and investigate the claim, and it'll go that route, and
Is that because the claim falls to us, the board of commissioners, and then we have official immunity for the duties that are ministerial?
I'm sorry.
Is that because the claim would fall to the board of commissioners, and then the board of commissioners has official immunity?
The county has sovereign immunity, the employees have what's called official immunity. private immunity means the county itself is immune from suit. The official immunity protects the employees and the officials of the county. And in essence, it's always the county defending those claims. So really, even though the employee is named, it's a claim against the county. Because obviously, the county is not going to leave the employee hanging out to dry.
I actually just did find that in the handbook about the official immunity, if it's a discretionary function, not
And the
performing
handbook,
powers.
I'm not sure the handbook was up to date because there was a 2010 Georgia Supreme Court case that came out that
I was saying I agree with you.
that clarified.
Yeah, leave it at that.
No, I just want to point out, there was a 2010 case that clarified ministerial duties and it made it harder to show a ministerial duty, in essence.
Again, we've had water running across this road for at least a week before this incident. Although we may have this immunity, we still didn't sign it or close it or warn anybody about this issue. When the Public Works actually did something with this is still kind of in question, but I believe we own at least some of this problem.
How many days did the road stay that way after? In other words, if it was a problem that they created, no one else hit it and had a problem with it for days and they didn't fix it for days? I'm trying to understand if it was just.
No, what happened was after I hit it and the motor graders got there, it was pretty much smoothed out when I came home that way.
It was pretty quick after I called the
Same
road
day.
department that they showed up to put out signs.
Right.
It was within, a couple hours that all of a sudden they're there to put out the warning signs.
So what would have happened if you would have called whenever you said you went through it that way for days before that?
Actually, I was talking to my neighbors before that, and we were trying to figure out who to call because it was getting, it was bad.
So see, that's another issue. What if that call would have been made prior to you doing it? Would they have?
Well, I know my neighbor Doug actually did call, and that's why he was discussing with them to put the culvert in.
I probably have some emails where I was sending them to the road department this up there. This is very much related to the logging problem that we're having. And I'm gonna tell you what I believe happened there is that the water started crossing the road and the log trucks beat it out. And the water crossing and continuing traffic driving through it, I'm sure beat it out worse and worse. And but with that, the question is, again, how much ownership do we have in it because we were there working in the area on it and not taking care of it with a temporary cross drain or something, or closing it even. If we had no presence in the area, I would not have this problem that I have saying that.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion, we deny the claim based on the fact that we don't have absolute proof the county's at fault. I'll say it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
That's good.
But I will tell you, since the roads are in such great shape, I do have a house for sale.
There you go. Well, maybe we can help you sell your house by putting the culvert in.
Well, I appreciate your deliverance on this. That's my baby, and I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to get it fixed. I can't prove when the thing was, how it was altered. All I know is I was told that it was dug, and I don't know.
think that's the biggest problem with this board, is nobody knows.
Thank you very much.
But sorry it's taken 2 meetings and all of your time to get to this point. Might want a paved road next time. And be
You know,
sure it's not ash under it.
I would not want your job. It seems like everything that comes up here has something to do with a stupid road. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your humor in the situation, sir. All right, so the record shows that that passed and Commissioner Mason voted against. All right, consideration to approve approve a final plat warranty deed for Clover Point Phase 1C.
Good evening again.
Hey, Steve.
Clover Point 1C. Clover Point is an existing subdivision off of Hodgeville Road. You probably remember we've approved previously the final plats for Phase 1A and 1B, as well as Phase 2. This is a water development served by county water. Excuse me, I'm sorry. This was approved way back in 2006, as-built submitted way back in 2008. Public Works has recently inspected the small area of the road that's about 7 or 8 lots wide on either side of the road. Found no problems. Water and sewer staffs checked out the water and sewer, found no problems. Recall that this was bonded previously. The entire Phase 1 was bonded previously with Phase 1A. So that was released over a year ago. We've gone through the documents. Everything appears to be in order. I actually have the original deed here with me, which I'll get to you in a moment. And everything's been forwarded to the county attorney for review. Don't find anything out of order with this. Staff recommends approval of final plat for Phase 1C.
You probably just told me that we released the 10% on Phase 1. Did we get another bond for this?
No, so they bonded all of Phase 1, which would be Phase 1A, B, C, and all the future phases in Phase 1 at the same time as Phase 1A. So everything's already been bonded, the years are already passed, and we've already released the bond for the entire Phase 1, this included. It was all done at the same time. Instead of bonding it individually for each individual phase, they bonded the entire Phase 1 all at one time upfront.
But is this a new road?
It's the same road that was Phase 1A and Phase 1B. It's all an extension of the same road. It's all the same road that was built at the same time and all bonded at the same time. Yes, sir. They didn't build it more to build this. It's the same road. It's been existing for several years now.
All the infrastructure was created, they're just platting the lots.
Right. If I didn't explain that properly, I apologize.
I just probably didn't hear it right. I just wanted to be sure we weren't.
Yeah, this road was built several years ago and bonded several years ago. They just don't want to plat all the lots all at one time because they don't want to pay taxes on all of the lots. They only want to pay taxes on the lots that they're building on. That's why they're doing it chunk by chunk. I tried to convince them that it might have been in their best favor to go ahead and get it all done at one time, but they don't want to.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat warranty deed for Phase 1C.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Consideration to renew a contract for Trailer Business Services Incorporated.
That's me. I'm Tillery Stapleton. I'm the appraiser in the assessor's office. And I'm here for Janice Bevel to present y'all with the renewal contract for the Business Personal Property Review Program. We contract them to do all the accounts over $50,000. And she does say that she's going to put it out for bids again in 2014.
It shows the board of assessors has already approved it at their meeting and the $7,500 has been budgeted.
Yes.
Motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the renewal contract as presented.
Motion and second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Tiller. Next item, consideration to accept a bid for catastrophic inmate medical insurance.
Fiona Charlton, purchasing agent. Good evening. We'd like to request board consideration to approve a bid for catastrophic inmate medical insurance. The county carries this type of insurance to cover catastrophic loss on inmates who are not under state custody. A request for quote was issued and advertised in the Effingham Herald, the Savannah Morning News, the Georgia Procurement Registry website, the Georgia Local Government Access website, and on the Effingham County website. One response was received from public risk underwriters using United Healthcare Optum Health as the carrier. The response from public risk offered three options. Option 1, premium of $15,210 with a $30,000 deductible per inmate. Option 2, an annual premium of $13,541 with a $35,000 deductible per inmate. And option 3, an annual premium of $12,152 with a $40,000 deductible per inmate. All options are 12 months incurred and 18 months paid, with a $250,000 limit of coverage per inmate. Plan coverage is from October 1st, 2013 to September 30th, 2014. As option number 2 provides the same coverage for the same premium as last year, staff recommends alternative 2 to accept and approve option 2 from public risk underwriters.
Any questions from the board? Have a motion?
Make a motion to approve with offer number 2.
Motion and a second, all in favor? Any opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
Next item, consideration to approve the 2013 EMPG Performance Partnership Grant application. He had 3 lines, I believe that one I see it.
Ed Meyer, EMA Director. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency, in cooperation with FEMA, provides local emergency management agencies with funding opportunities to enhance the local emergency management program. This funding can be used for administration, preparedness activities, exercise and training, response and recovery, and equipment purchases. The 2013 EMPG Performance Partnership Grant application is a primary example of this program. The grant totals $31,350. As you know, Effingham County is categorized as a Tier 4, therefore local match would be $15,675. This is an expense that has already been included in the approved fiscal year 2014 budget, Department 20, under salaries. There are a few requirements that accompany this grant. It is in the form of the performance that is displayed from Department 20. Example of this are the required 3 exercises that EEMA must perform each year. This 2013 EMPG Performance Partnership Grant is one that Effingham County receives every year without complications thus far. Therefore, I would like to respectfully request the approval of alternative number 1.
Any questions from the board? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Approve what? Option number 1? Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Motion and a second to approve option number 1. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Thanks, Ed. Consideration to approve COBRA administrative services through United Healthcare.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, we are looking to seek approval from the board to approve COBRA, which is the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1985. These are administrative services that would be done through United Healthcare. This enables employees and dependents that no longer qualify under an employer-provided group benefit plan to continue insurance under the group benefit plan for a certain period of time. Currently, we are managing this process in-house between Human Resources and Finance. Council has recommended the process be combined with our healthcare providers, so all aspects and changes required by the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act beginning in 2014 be met, reducing liability on the county. We will be using and utilizing only the maintenance and direct billing portion of the plan. The cost for that is 55 cents for price per eligible per month, otherwise known as PEPM, and it's for year 1 and 2 currently. We have approximately 360 that are eligible. Total per year is approximately $2,500. So if you look at the sheet that has the Cobra Direct billing and fees, you will see what's included in that 55 cents PEPM. Again, I will tell you, we will not be using retiree billing services or electing optional services or doing open enrollment services. I can still handle that through human resources for the time being.
It shows this was already budgeted.
I waited to see if we could afford it within the personnel with the, once we voted on healthcare and also who we were going to choose for our healthcare provider. We can afford it because we just saved over $100,000 in the healthcare reduction that we just made. So it is available at this point, and it's only, as I said, $2,500 for the year.
Finance good with that? Put you on the spot.
Yes, we've discussed this. Part of the issue here is the fact that there is liability with actually taking these payments. We've had issues with the fact of prior employees not making payments. Then there's issues with how you necessarily cut them off. And we both felt like this would be better for the agency itself handling the COBRA insurance to actually take the payments and ensure and handle the administrative piece of it. Yes, sir.
But when it shows in here under funding, because I just want to be sure that I understand these things when they come before us, it says the cost is included in the 2013-2014 approved budget. It doesn't actually show in our budget, but you're saying you have figured a way you can handle it in that budget.
Yes, because of the reduction that we saw in healthcare costs and the reductions that we made in our plan, we are able to look at affording this under the personnel
Okay,
section.
and all I'm saying back to you is for future reference for all items. If it says it's already included in the budget, it should already be in the budget, or literally say we found a way to absorb it in our budget. So that we understand, that would be helpful to me anyway.
Sure.
We will be able to absorb it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve audit number 1.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve a proclamation for the month of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, over the past several years, the board has approved this proclamation for the Effingham Victim Witness Assistance Program. And it's done throughout the month of October, beginning of October.
We're asking for approval to proclaim the month of October. I don't actually have to read this proclamation
No, you
tonight.
don't. It's called Living.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm forward to it. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve staff recommendations option 1 and approve the following.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve an audit engagement letter with Canes, Hodges and Company for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2014.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Jones.
Sorry, I was trying to clarify with Rush a piece of information on one of the next items. Each year, we put before you an audit engagement letter. This past year, we did a RFP and did a recap of solicited bids We did a 2-year agreement with Keynes Hodges at that time, and this is the annual letter that comes before you for approval, and we simply seek your approval at this point.
Any discussion from any board members?
Yeah. I have a problem with using Mr. King's again in light of 6 months late on past audit with no real explanation as to why it was 6 months late. And that in itself, you know, I think it would do our county justice to rebid this and at least look at some options.
Also, I have something to add to that. Mr. Keynes took it on himself to request an extension, and the administrator or the board of commissioners had nothing to do with it. We did not know that at all. And I also have concern that in order to compromise, staff and commissions had input which should not have happened. There was information in the audit that was incorrect, to personal conclusion, not factual, and no attempt to confirm truth. And I am not comfortable trusting the business of the county to Mr. Keynes. And also, it is not the guy with Keynes, Hodges, and Pace, and Pace is no longer in that establishment.
If that's within the staff report, then that's my error.
Pardon?
If that's within the staff report, if you're talking about in the staff report.
On the agenda.
Some of the agenda.
No, it actually says Keynes, Hodges and Company, which is correct. Unless you've seen it somewhere in the contract or the letter.
That's right there. For the past several years, after review of hourly rate, work paper, and all this kind of stuff, complex financial transactions of the county board of basis has led to retain Keynes, Hodges, and Pace.
Facts and findings number 6.
That's my error.
Well, anyway.
The lateness is the one.
I think I changed it up top if you look in the background. And when I did replace, it evidently didn't pick up that one to replace.
So with what I said, I would like to make a motion to seek another accounting firm to handle the 2013 and 20 audit to Effingham County.
Well, before entertaining that motion, I would just like to, I only get to vote in case of a tie, so I don't get to vote yet. But I have serious concerns about the independency of the audit, this firm. Those concerns I have had expressed to me by several elected officials in this county. And at least one has told me that if this particular firm is engaged, the only way that they will work with them is through a Superior Court judge issuing an order that makes them do it. That gives me a lot of concern.
Is this one a constitutional officer?
Yes, it is.
And they don't.
So, let me just finish my statement and I'll have this stuff.
Should be your voice in their opinion.
When you have as much controversy as we have had over an issue such as this audit, that coupled with the fact, as Commissioner Mason has stated, was late, and the only answer that I have gotten from when I asked the auditor why it was late, he said, there was problems with me and my partner. We were dissolving our partnership, and there was issues with things that Joanna had things going on, and we decided not to throw each other under the bus. That's not good enough for me. I like clear answers to questions when I ask them. And then as I understand the way this county's policy is, we issued a contract for this firm to do this audit. And without the board's approval in any shape, fashion, or form, that audit process was extended. It was never brought back before the board that I can notice in any record, but it was unilaterally just decided to apply for an extension. We were lucky that it was granted. There are reasons to grant it, which I think the state just looked the other way and granted it anyhow. But because of so much controversy that surrounds this audit, and because of so much controversy over how the information was presented, I think the bigger question is, why would this board want to engage the same firm to do another year? Would it not be prudent in the eyes of the citizens to draw the line and get another person, another firm that would not be tainted in any way to do our audit?
Well, I think to add to what you're saying, in the meeting with Mr. Keynes, when I asked why we had such a different audit previous to this year, his response was, sometimes it's good to have a second set of eyes look at it, in reference to his son helping him doing the preponderance of his audit. So with that same answer that he gave us on that, is why I suggest that we bid this out, look at the cost difference, and make a decision based on that. I'm not going to say that we wouldn't use Mr. Keynes, but I think we need to bid this and consider that when we look at the bids.
Well, there was one other question that I asked that I never got an answer, except for the fact he was afraid that our county attorney would become belligerent. You know, there was issues of legality brought up in this audit for different things, and not once was this ever presented, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, since you're sitting here. Not once was any of those legality issues brought up with our county's attorney. And I don't understand that. And when I asked that question, the only answer I've gotten was because he was afraid that our attorney would become belligerent. There's just so much controversy. And because, in my opinion, he broke the contract by not performing as it was the first year. And even if he'd have kept it to the letter, I mean, we can get out of this in 30 days' notice. I would prefer that this board authorize me or whomever to get quotes from 2-3 other companies that I could present to this board 2 weeks from now, and let us make this decision then, not now.
Well, if we agree to go with the bidding it out process and still allowing him to bid and others to bid, would we follow the same course as we always do as far as sending the RFP out? We don't need the chairman to try to attempt to find a company. We have a process that we follow. Is that all right?
We generally do send an RFP out. There is a different option. Let me speak to only two or three things that have been brought up. As far as the extension that was discussed, and usually it's something that is discussed with the administrator, and that was discussed with the administrator, that we were going to be late. It was under my belief that that had been communicated to this board. As such, we went ahead and did that. We would have never done that, and the staff member would have never done that, had we not believed that that information had been communicated to this board.
I never remember that being brought up.
It was brought up with David Crawley, and David Crawley was to communicate that information with the board.
But the underlying fact will still exist. There is so much controversy either way with the previous audit, and I think a fresh set of eyes, and that is in fact using Donald Kane's own words.
I understand that. I'm only trying to address the 2 points that you've addressed with me.
I understand, and if I misspoke, I did not mean to imply anything on your behalf. I was just simply stating that I think it would behoove this board to look before making a decision whether or not to re-engage this person. And it is my opinion that our policy and procedures allow for actions of this board to allow to circumvent the normal purchasing options. We can get information and have it back here for this board to consider in 2 weeks.
Well, we also have the other option that when we did do this RFP, we had probably somewhere around 6 to 8 actually apply. We can go back and review those and ask whether or not any of those other 3 firms would be viable. And I would like the board.
I'm invited to do that, but I think we need to just put this out in the open.
Whoever wants to be in on it, let them be in.
Well, I was not here at the time it was awarded, but from the information given to me, James was not the lowest bidder, is that correct?
When we looked at all of the factors together, and I have the sheet that we actually did up, we looked at the total hours that were applied. We also looked at what the partner hours were being applied. We looked at whether or not they were going to charge any additional hours for travel and so forth. We also looked at the hours that they had represented for each one of the entities. Some of those look small as far as the hours, for instance, for the tax commissioner's office. We also looked at whether or not they had heavily discounted that amount. In other words, one of them had gone up to $65,000 with a $22,000 discount. In that, they basically quoted only for the fees for 2012 rather than 2012 and 2013. So there was more parameters to look at necessarily. One of the other parameters were with the number of hours they included during the year just for general consultation, or whether or not that was going to be on an hourly rate.
All in all, I thought it was stated to us that he did pan out to be the lowest with all things considered. I thought that was actually said. I remember thinking he was the lowest bid.
When we looked at the average hourly rate that was being charged and the overall hours of the audit itself and the additional hours that were available with the partner, that is correct.
To me, I just think that it would be prudent, because we have such a dramatic shift from year to year in our audit results and findings, that
I hope we have a dramatic shift.
that I would like to see somebody else come up with one or the other in agreement with how we're doing and how we have done it. Because there can't be that much difference in the 2 years of audits just because, from the same company, just because the principal's son did the preponderance of the work on it. But using his own reasoning for why that was a fresh set of eyes is exactly how it was described. I think that's partly why we need to have somebody else look at this.
The other thing I would like to suggest also too, and I had already typed this up, was to put in a little bit different structure of how we do this. I think part of the issue has become the fact of communication and how that communication is relayed. Evident in that is whether or not y'all knew that the extension was being applied for. Evident in that was necessarily the items that transpired during those discussions with different commissioners.
When was the extension filed?
It's right at the end of December.
Right.
Yes.
So it was actually the very last minute.
January 2nd.
Yeah.
First
It's actually the day after the first.
So it was only at the very end we filed for an extension.
That's
So
correct.
After, or when it was due, we filed for an extension. And then it was 6 more months. So apparently it wasn't even being worked on until after the extension was filed. Or why would it take 6 more months to do it?
No, sir. There was field work being done during that time. There was trial balances being turned over. There was a little bit more extensive work in the courts during that period of time that lagged some of that. Some of the paperwork that necessarily are work papers that were requested in January, if you remember, lost, was going on during that point. Also in December, a lot of that work was done in November. So there was a whole host of different.
I still have a hard time believing it took a year to put it together, because it should be started now. I mean, that's why we're looking at it now.
And when I've got constitutional officers telling me that he did not even make the first visit to their office until about 4 weeks before we got the order.
I think we need a new face myself.
I don't believe that to be correct. There was initial field work done, so, you know, and that generally happens before he comes in to work with us. And I cannot speak for him, but generally that work transpires before us.
Like I say, there's just so much controversy that surrounds this audit. And the fact that these constitutional officers have expressed such.
Was there more than one?
Yes.
I haven't had any.
In fact, I was thinking that there was at least 2 of them going to be here tonight. But
Well, let me do this, if it's all right, and I'll give one to the clerk also. This is the preliminary audit structure and process calendar that I had done up. I still believe that we need to perhaps provide a little bit more structure in this, communications in this, make people aware. Some of the things that I had put in here was to basically have a status report, a presentation report to this commission to ensure that you are aware from this floor of exactly what was transpiring and what work had been done and what had been completed. Additionally was to put in specific meetings with the elected officials to ensure that that process took place with them individually, and to go ahead and put a timeline in here as to when the preliminary draft of the financial statements would be done, and when that presentation would be to this board. It is similar to what we've done in the past regarding other items that we handle, such as the budget, and a few of the items that usually trail over several months. This is simply to try and make this board aware from the floor of exactly what would be transpiring with it. If it needs to be changed or amended, then it would require this board to do so.
Have you put those recommendations in the policies that we have been given to review or not?
Many of them are.
Well, that timeline is going to apply to whoever's hired.
Yes, yeah, that's.
If we decide to put out the RFP, how long does that take?
I would say we would be able to have it done probably in about 4 weeks.
And that would be a thorough, where they're detailed, just like they gave us last time, where we can compare.
The only thing, to be fair, is this information that we have, is this open, the amount that they quoted to do this work for us? I want to know that that's not for somebody else. To be fair, Mr. Keynes, that's not floating around for somebody else to know what
Like
this
he's already made it float, so now if we go quoted.
Understood. When we originally did the RFP, of course, those who requested that information, we released that information to them. So any of those top firms, and I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Let me interrupt you and say this,
Yes,
though. If we're not accepting this tonight, we're not accepting this contract. So if we put out a new RFP for everyone to bid, he'd have to rebid, and his bid may be totally different.
But I wouldn't want that number floating, you know what I mean? Because then that's.
As far as
I'm just saying, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm just saying that.
As far as I know, any of these firms may have had access to it at that time. I do not believe that it's currently on our website. I did check that. And so the board itself would only be the only factor that would have the information of what was done before.
The constitutional officers that have concerns, have they asked to not be named?
I didn't ask them specifically.
I'm just always, I just like if somebody
But
wants to have a complaint, they should.
that's what I was hoping that they would be here. I like people
Ask them
speak
to
for
come,
themselves.
If you're
or
telling
give
me,
us a statement
yeah,
or something, if they can't be here, give us a statement or something. Because, when we say
it would be
somebody's
good for all of us to have to vote, it'd be good for all of us to know all of the information.
in the interest of fairness and for the good of the county, I can't see how anybody would be against putting this out.
The only thing I would like to make sure that everyone knows is that normally we start about this time. So in doing that, we will be pushed to get it done. I'm not saying that we can't, I'm just saying that we will. The second piece of that is depending upon the auditor itself. Generally, they give us a list of work papers, a list of items that they need and they want. And that varies greatly between them as far as what work papers they're going to want us to furnish, how they're going to want us to furnish that information, and the depth to that detail.
You have to have all of your trial balances finished before anybody can start, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
How
They
far
always,
away are you from having that done?
we worked this past weekend. I think we have about 90% of the accounts validated. I'd say there's about 10% left to validate, and we're working between now and trying to get a goal of having that done by this weekend.
And one of those issues is with personnel trying to reconcile this insurance account.
We have insurance accounts that we need to reconcile to validate those, that's correct.
And in a conversation that I had with Rush today, it looks like that's probably a 2-week process to get those done.
Well, it depends. The major part of it, I believe she's already supplied. I believe that was supplied about a week ago, which is about probably 80% of those accounts. The difference is that we have a prepaid account. And the reason why that prepaid account is reconciled is to ensure that when people are being added to the policy or subtracted to the policy, that the HR staff themselves know that those things are taking place and they're taking place accurately, and that we are not being billed for anything more or less. The total difference in those accounts, if it's immaterial, once we make the entries for the majority of it, could be simply zeroed as long as we have some sort of validation that the additional reconciliation took place.
But that
In other words,
that needs to be reconciled before the work can start. So is it a fair statement to think that it's going to be 2 weeks before any auditor could get started?
it depends upon what the net difference of the prepaid versus what has already been expensed through the system is. If it is immaterial in nature, no. If it is material in nature, there's a possibility.
And what I'm getting at is, I think that the board policy, if this board chooses to act in that manner, we can, in 2 weeks' time, we can contact everybody that bid, find out if they still have an interest in bidding. We can talk with Mr. Keynes, ask him to put in another bid. If there's people that have expressed an interest to perform the audit that's not on this, we can give them this information and we can get their bids back within 2 weeks. And this board, by board action, can shorten that bid process to nothing if we so choose. So would it not be fair to say that if this board was to wait 2 weeks and go through this process, we're really not going to hold up anything?
I would say as long as it's within 4 weeks and we could get the information of what they're going to require, that there is a possibility of that. All I'm telling you is now that trying to get it done from October or mid-October to December 31st with holidays in there, and the fact that I believe we will only have one board meeting in December, it will be pushing.
Eric, I
We
haven't
have
had a chance.
two board meetings in December.
I haven't had a chance to look back at the contract, and I really didn't catch until you spoke it. I probably should have read it somewhere in here today. But the fact that we approved a 2-year agreement, speak to that, because was that, will he be able to come back and claim if we were to make a change now? Number one, we got the whole thing about we only approve things from year to year, but then this was 2 years with a, what does that mean? And then was his pricing based on the fact that he got a 2-year up front, and then he'd be able to say, hey, now you owe me more? Because, I mean, what is the situation about why was it, if it was 2 years but we're not held to it, what does all that mean?
There's a couple factors. I think one is it is more than a year, and I'm not sure the board can be bound to an agreement beyond a year. The second thing is that it's not the same firm anymore. It was Kane Lodge's Pace and Company that bid on that engagement.
And your point is they no longer
In fact,
exist.
it now Kane's Hodges. And my recollection is that there was a firm biography that was submitted that all the principles of the firm are identified and discussed. And when you're talking about professional services, generally, the board has the discretion to choose the people they want. It's different than a contract to purchase something or for road work or construction, because you're really purchasing personal services. So I don't think there's really any issue there if the board chooses to solicit new proposals and bid this out again. If I can speak to one comment, I just want to say, for the record, before the board, I don't believe I've ever had a cross word with Mr. Haynes or a cross email exchange. So that comment to me is very puzzling. I will tell you, Mr. Haynes, in a conversation in early April about another matter, I asked him how the audit was going, and he said, well, there'd been some issues. I asked if there were going to be any, I don't remember if I used adverse findings or material weaknesses. And he said, well, yes, he thought there were. And I said, what's the nature of them? And he said he'd rather not say. And it's made it difficult for our firm to give advice about some of these findings that later appeared in the audit. Because we still don't, to this day, I still don't know what some of the factual underpinnings are. In particular, I'm talking about related party transactions. It's hard for our firm to advise the board what you should and shouldn't do if I don't have that information.
Are you typically privy to the information of the audit prior to it being presented to the board for discussion?
I would have thought the whole board should have been aware of.
Typically, there's a legal something.
Some of those related party transactions are. And if you read accounting standards, generally when the auditor runs into what is a legal issue that requires parsing of facts and legal issues, typically they would get an attorney involved, whether it would be our firm or someone else. But it certainly would have been helpful from my perspective to assist the board with legal guidance. If some of these practices continued after the auditor was aware of it because they weren't conveyed to us, then we were exposed on our board, as was the board. talking about municipalities and belligerent.
She has a reputation for that.
Any other questions or discussion?
I just don't see how we can not try to get another person to look at this unless there's a huge difference in price. So that we know where we actually stand, which in my opinion is, was this year's audit 100% accurate and correct, or was the previous 4 or 5 accurate and correct? Because there was dramatic difference in the one this year and the ones previous. And the answer to the reason for that was a fresh set of eyes. So that's where I stand with this, is I think a fresh set of eyes needs to look at this unless there's a huge difference in cost for us.
All right. Come forward and state your name and tell us what you got to say.
Eli Vandiver. I'm a citizen in District 1. And as many of y'all know, I am also an employee of the county. What I'm going to say this evening to you all is simply information that I've gathered outside of my employment, simply in reading the articles in the paper and various things on the news. I do understand that price is definitely an issue. That's definitely a concern because you are all stewards of the taxpayers' money. My personal recommendation or opinion on the matter, we don't need an audit firm this close. My personal opinion would be look for someone who's outside of, I don't know, a 100-mile radius, someone who's neutral, someone who does not have connections here in the county. As I stated, you know, that's simply my personal opinion. And as well, as I stated, you know, I am a citizen here in the county. I'm tired of seeing my county with a lot of negative publicity. Whether it's intended or not, we've been in the papers way too much. We need to step back. As I stated, I don't know if it's intended or not with Canes and Hodges, but simply everything that's come forward with that particular firm, I would like to encourage you all to vote otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Eli. You know that there's two
That's
two
very
papers
brave
here,
of you to speak.
and you may be in the paper this week.
That's fine.
Anyone else?
On that note, there were firms out of the Savannah area, there were firms out of the Statesboro area. So I don't know they're outside of a 100-mile radius. I would say they're outside of probably 25, 30-mile radius that had already applied this policy.
Possibly a non-county entity?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion in whatever fashion I would, whether it's to totally not do this one, or whether it's to table action on this one, that would give this board opportunity to get to review previous and anyone else that wants to present information, so that this board might have all that information 2 weeks from now to make the decision.
The only thing, I'd like to make a motion, something to table or whatever, but I think we can't table this if we're going to ask them to rebid it. I think this would be, it would be a no.
This would be dead.
So with that, and I'll make a motion that we not approve the engagement letter with King Hodges at this time, and ask staff to solicit bids from those who have bid on this previously, and anybody that's interested in bidding, and at least advertise it on the website and in the papers. That's my motion. So my motion would be to deny this with those stipulations.
I second.
Can, before you second it, can you amend that motion or be willing to allow the board to forego the normal period of time because it will take board action to consider any bids in 2 weeks?
What does that mean? Explain to me what you mean. What do we forego?
Normal purchasing of, sorry.
There's no time limit. It does say anything over $5,000 must be bid unless waived by the commissioner or the board, by the administrator or the board of commissioners.
And
But
that's
there's not a time period.
But that's what I'm saying, this board is going to have to waive that unless you do.
Well, we could still do an RFP with I was just looking, the initial one was done for 15 days. You would have to truncate that obviously, or waive it altogether as you suggested that you wanted to. I mean, we could still do a request for bids or proposal or quotes, whatever. Just, it would have to be much less than 15 days.
But to consider it 2 weeks from now, number one, we're going to have to go ahead and put it on the agenda.
I believe so. I believe that we could go ahead. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, sir.
Because you want to have it back in
Correct.
time.
That's correct.
So we're going to need this information back basically in a week to get it disseminated to the commission to have time to review it.
Unless the board was fine with emailing that out prior to the meeting or something, as long as you have it prior to the meeting. Again, that would be a decision of this board.
But it takes board action to forego that time period.
To forego the RFP process, yes, sir, which isn't, there is a time period for a public works, construction, or road work. There's not in this particular for professional services.
I think what he's referring to is in our purchasing policy, it basically says that, we are supposed to bid out these services of anything over $5,000. The difference here is whether or not you're going to do a full RFP or whether or not you simply want to go back to the ones that had put in before. And I think that's the difference in.
I think my motion kind of covered that. Basically, we
Second
want
that.
Anybody else?
those who bidded
Mhm.
on our previous request for price and go ahead and put it on the website and advertise it. So, but with that same period of time.
Yes, sir. It just has to be back in time to get it forward. That's correct.
What we did in the past on these was we went ahead and sent, I think I had a list of about 20, if I'm not mistaken. Fiona, were you here during that time? Is that math? We had a list, I think, of somewhere between 15 or 20 that we actually sent emails to ensure that we got a good listing.
I think the motion's okay.
All right, we good, Eric? We go ahead.
I think so.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? All opposed?
Aye.
All right. Reggie and Steve voted for.
To
deny.
rebid. And we voted not to rebid.
Okay.
I make the motion, I have confidence in Mr. Kenny, and I make a motion we approve staff recommendation of alternative 1 for irrigation letter, Mr. James. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed?
Aye.
3, 4, 2 again.
Well, I figured y'all would because he
Surprise, surprise.
He put in order what y'all wanted him to put in there, so that's fine.
I make a big speech, but it get reinterpreted anyway, so. Anybody in District 1 that wants to talk to me about that, they got my number.
All right, next item. Consideration to approve the grant contract for Family Connection, United Way. Joanna?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Moving to the next item. If you recall, this past year, we tried to go through, especially on all of our grants in our agencies, and ensure that we had agreements with those agencies for the type financial transactions that we are handling for them. One of the items that was not done at that time were transactions that we handle with Family Connections regarding United Way. United Way provides for them what they term undesignated funds. They can spend those within their program as they see fit and choose to do. Additionally, at different times, we have taken in donations, which the county is allowed to do. The difference is that, as you have said in the past about this board being aware, I wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we do from time to time take in undesignated funds that we run through this county and then disperse those funds based upon the Family Connections Board asking us to do so.
But are you saying there's an issue with that as far as why?
I'm not saying there's an issue with necessarily doing that under the Family Connections piece of it, only the fact that we as the county, rather than it running through their 501(c) and them handling that function themselves, because we have been handling the grants for them, that these particular transactions are different, and it was not within the Family Connections agreement for the grant. So I wanted to make sure that the board is aware that we are taking in other types of funding for Family Connections, which they are dispersing through us. And that's the reason for this agreement, is to ensure that there is an agreement in place and that this board is aware that we, in fact, are taking funds from United Way. In the past, we've taken funds from dealerships. We've taken funds from various entities on behalf of Family Connections for their programs and for them to disperse.
It's an acceptable practice under audit standards as long as we have it in an agreement. Is that what you're saying? Or sometimes
We are allowed as a county to take donations. I believe that it's fine for us to take these donations on their behalf and for them to expend it within their particular umbrella of their board. The difference is that I did not want to be taking funds in that this board was not aware of, other than county-directed funds.
such as give me an example.
For example, they have a car dealership that sometimes gives them a donation for Family Connections. It runs through our accounts.
They make a check out
to I believe the last time they made it out to the county.
Because in order to deposit it in the county account,
Correct.
it needs to be made out that way, right?
Yes, ma'am. We have funds for United Way that United Way also gives. They have several different programs, one of which was under the other grant agreement that we did.
And then what line item, where's that money go, so that you're accounting
Sure.
that came in for that and it's going
Goes
out?
in, it goes in under Department 40
Okay.
is where that goes.
Where's 40?
Department 40 is the Family Connections Department. This simply spells out those agreements as to what we are doing and to ensure that the board is aware that we are doing it.
Have you reviewed that?
I believe Elizabeth reviewed it and made her changes.
Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve Article number 1.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve a request of a budget amendment regarding reductions to budgeted line items for health insurance costs and our pending adjustments to budget line items.
In this particular budget amendment, we were going ahead and making the budget amendments for those items that this board has already approved, and several other ones. If you recall, this board earlier approved doing the refurbish of the batteries. This board also had approved the health insurance policy. And so you will see a series of adjustments to the budget. The overall recap is on the first 2 pages. The detail of those changes is on pages 4 through 6, I believe. It is by the individual department and by that individual account code to meet our budget specifications and our budget ordinance as far as moving those dollars from one category to another. You will see that, for instance, we have the healthcare insurance as a subtraction to those individual departments, and then we have the overall change applied to Department 15. We are going ahead and making that budget amendment and putting that into the contingency line item for Department 15. This simply is to provide the board with the detail of those budget amendments and to go ahead and make those movements into those categories.
So the $2,500 that we just approved, that we had saved, and we are already moving it somewhere else.
We're moving it into Department 15 under contingency so that this board has the direction for how those funds are spent. So yes, it is being moved out of the departments, individual departments, and into the board's direction.
And then as an example, Rush would bring that back for you as a line item to be spent back in her department at $2,500 today.
Correct. If we could not already absolve it within Department 15, and I think we probably have enough in fees already in Department 15 to absorb that without a budget amendment. The other item that is on here that's significant is on the change from our debt service. If you will notice, I made a adjustment from the SPLOST building, the SPLOST building fund into our SPLOST debt service. We just did our first payment on the certificates of participation. And so we need to go ahead and move that funding to the appropriate department from where it's dispersed.
How did $14,000 in tax assessor, we're already saving $14,000 from, or am I reading that wrong?
In which your
Tax assessor,
yes, sir.
line item 12.
That's correct. That's $14,000.
We've already figured out that we put $14,000 too much in their budget.
$14,000 of health insurance.
Health insurance savings from what
Savings.
they budgeted, they over budgeted.
So all of this is directed to health insurance?
Most all of it is directed to health insurance. If you look, let me go down item by item. The first item that's on there is Department 2. That is the DA's budget. They submitted, if you recall, during the last few months, their top person over there at the DA's office has been out on family leave quite a bit, and so they submitted their final budgeted figure to us. That was $6,104.56, so we added that in. The next is Solicitor's Office. That is a decrease in their budget of $3,240.35. That is all health insurance. The next one, probate, $400.58. That is health insurance. So each one of those items we subtracted out of the salary portion or salary category of those individual departments for the savings that we had within the health insurance. And if you go down and you look at Department 15, you will see that we then pulled in $299,345.63 into our contingency line item, so that we basically have shifted that budget amount from those individual departments into the contingency line item that the board has control over.
Okay.
Now, we'll call your attention to some of the special funds. If you look at the special funds, in most of those, where we had a contingency line item, we put it within the contingency line item. If there were other places where we knew that we had particular issues, for instance, an E911, if you look at Department 35, which is on page 6 of 6, we took the credit for the health insurance out and we put it in R&M replacement of batteries, contingency, R&M replacement of batteries. So basically, the amount that the board approved at one of your prior agendas was paid for by the health insurance savings. Fire, we put that into repairs and maintenance and then into contingency.
So if an expense has already been approved by us in addition to the budget, you've already removed that over, what you're saying?
That's correct. Or in the special funds, we put it where we believed it to be needed, where there's already subjects coming up that we knew that more than likely we would need some additional funding in there. But for instance, in the 911, those were the batteries that you already approved. So we've been able to functionally pay for that out of the healthcare insurance savings. That's why it gets a little bit tricky on this budget, is moving line item to line item. That's why I provide you with the detail so that you can see exactly what we're subtracting and exactly what we're adding.
That's a job keeping up with money coming and going, isn't it? Tell me again, where did Green Drive get paid for?
Green Drive.
In Westwood Heights?
Westwood Heights.
Westwood Heights.
That would have been a SPOS item.
Okay.
It would have come out of SPOS drainage, I believe, is where that came from,
All right.
which would have already been budgeted.
Motion?
Motion to approve alternative 1 with the budget amendment as given.
Motion and a second. Approve item number 1. All in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Next item, consideration to approve a letter to Jeff Kilgore on the Eli Whitney Watershed Project. Who wants to talk?
I'll start first. There's been much debate and talk about this particular issue over the past year and a half or so. The board's been presented with a lot of information. Also Mr. Kilgore would like us to clean out this particular ditch on his property, at least up to Midland Road. We're not entirely sure that's in the county's best interest to do so. And what you have before you is a letter indicating that, written by the county attorney based on the information that we currently have and what we've been able to gather on this particular situation. And you've got a synopsis of it behind you. That was the bullet points that Steve wrote on this particular issue. And we could go into as much detail as you all want as to what happened, what transpired. It's somewhat ambiguous. This thing happened in the 50s and 60s.
It started in the 60s and was done in the early 70s.
So the work was done in the early 70s. A lot of the easements were put in place in the late 60s. Even in the 50s, some of them were pushing 10 years old. So finding the record or anybody with knowledge of this is a little bit difficult. We have secured some records from the Soil Conservation Service. We've had input from the Army Corps of Engineers.
But basically, it's the feeling that Mr. Kilgore is entitled to some answer on his request. And has a letter been prepared that the to basically give him that answer. And I'm looking for a motion from an approval of this board to allow me to sign that letter.
And that letter is alternative number 1, is that correct?
Yeah.
The board should have received a memo, much more detailed memo from me a couple of weeks back. It's not part of this package because it contains his opinions.
Actually, we got it on August the 6th.
It is a project that's buried in history. This Eli Whitney watershed project. It doesn't appear that it was ever completed in the manner that it was originally proposed to be completed. Even early on, there were discussions that other agencies had concerns about the environmental impact of draining all these wells and doing all the digging, so the scope was cut down some. We've not been able to locate any work records. The work records that USDA has been able to find are spotty. There are no as-built construction drawings, so there's no way to determine the actual contours of the ditches when they were originally constructed, which creates a whole other issue. Even though we could go in there according to the Corps and restore the ditches to their original depth and contours, we don't know what those were because there are no as-built drawings. So there could be issues there. It essentially appears to be an abandoned drainage easement.
So he had acquired the property in 2003, and in 2011 was the first time he asked us to do something about the old drainage issue he found, or?
As far as I know, I don't know.
Okay. You
That's
don't have
the
any knowledge of it
information.
coming before the board before, or?
That's correct. If he came to other board members in the past, I wouldn't
I
have
think
any
so.
knowledge.
It's possible to anything of it.
Yes.
Nothing ever is finished.
It was brought up to me the year that we went.
It's pretty clear that the county had not done any maintenance in there in many, many, many years, if ever at all.
Thing is, there was a time when you were encouraged to drain low land and create farmland. Now, it's the other way.
Which is exactly what this project was considered for, was to drain low land. But I think you also look at the dates and the dates coinciding with the Clean Water Act and all. I believe that's where these begin to conflict.
And even though the Corps let us go in and do something now, from a contract standpoint, it would be so costly to do it under the parameters the Corps would make you do it.
Correct.
It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and for what method?
Yes.
There were some 45 miles of ditches planned just for this Eli Whitney watershed. So it started out as a project on a very, very grand scheme. And how many miles of ditches were actually built, we don't know.
Charlie Branch told me years ago from Soil and Water that the only one that ever was really completed was the Turkey Branch watershed. That of all the ones that was projected, that was the one that they ever really completed.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 1, send a letter to Jeff Kilgore denying his request for maintenance.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. All right. Item number 12, consideration for approval of Effingham County's 2014 Levitic project list. Mr. Adams?
A slight discrepancy between your staff report and what's in the book, and I apologize, I threw this on Ms. Johnson at the last moment. There are actually two requests here. When I wrote the staff report, there was only one. The staff report contemplates our normal annual limited dollars, which in 2014 is $625,992.62, which is up from last year, which was $574. We again have a 30% match because we're in a region that failed to pass the T-SPLOST referendum, which is fine. 30% match to $360,000. The work that is contemplated to be done on that is well in excess of 130% of the funds that we're expected to receive. What you should have and what you have partially, there's an application included that goes off to GDOT for these funds. And there's an LD project report. The one that's in your book is actually not the one that goes in that staff report. And then if you go to the back, there's a letter dated September 10th to Mr. Terry Gable. That's an update letter on what we did with last year's LD funds. If the board recalls, last year was the first year this was done. Previous to that, it was LARP and state aid. So this will be the first year that we will have an update letter. What this update letter says is we have yet to expend any of those funds. If you recall back last year, the two projects that we listed were Blue Jay and McCall. What I have is a list. It should be in your additional information up there somewhere. That looks just like the one that's in your book, except it has two projects, Blue Jay and McCall. And the sum totals $2.4 million roughly. I believe those are still viable projects. Those are still projects the board wants to do. We discussed them. We would have gotten to them in the short-term work program. We've gotten that far. The difference is there has been some discussion as to which road we did which way. And by that I mean the original estimates contemplated Blue Jay Road being upgraded to more of a truck corridor. After that, there was some discussion. There was all the incidents at Blue Jay and Midland, where there was some fatalities and some wrecks. And it was my understanding what I thought I heard the board say, that we need to get the trucks off of Blue Jay Road. So we were going to do so. I don't want to improve that with truck corridor. I certainly want to make it right for cars, but not for trucks. Subsequent to that, we also had discussions on improving the Call Road as maybe the Northern Connectors Parkway as an alternative. Since then, we went to the trouble to try to apply right away to Blue Jay and Call, those sorts of things, which I believe that the board supports that. I say all that to say I believe we need to reverse possibly the way this was originally being done, was to spend more money on Call and less on Blue Jay. So those were the things that held it up and the reason that it never went forward. I believe we now have all of those issues resolved. We're ready to move forward with those projects. So I have asked Mr. Gable in this request to use our previous year's dollars plus our new year's, which will be roughly $1.2 million of the 2.4 that we have in that project. So that letter or that particular report should be in your book. So the first question is the board okay with those two projects? Because in effect, what we're doing is what we're submitting is the board's approval of that project list, which would be Blue Jay and McCall. Second question, and what these other pieces are, is we submitted a request to GDOT for emergency funding with some of the road issues we were having. Porter's Lane was one of those roads for the pipe that was installed there. You can see the list of roads and the dollar amounts that are here. We originally submitted a request that had approximately $80,000 on it. GDOT came out, took a look at our roads, and said, great, let's pare it down to the roughly $50,000 number you got here. And there is a letter that the chairman has in his possession. I don't believe I have the time to sign this book that basically approves that funding amount up to $40,000. So if you work off of $50,000, it's roughly $35,000. It's $34,622, whatever exactly that number is, of dollars that we will be getting in addition to the $600,000 normal LMA dollars that we're going to get. So that request came, not request, but Mr. Roser called me after all this information had already been submitted for the books and said, hey, can you fill out the exact same LMA forms? So I sent that to Ms. Bethany and I got it all confused. So that is my fault. I don't apologize. So there are actually two requests in here. One for emergency funding, the other for the initial $652,000. Unfortunately, you can't change the list on emergency funding because it's already been approved through GDOT, but it's $35,000 additional dollars for getting. The other one, you do have full discretion to say if you want those two roads or different roads, what you want to do with it.
Now, just just so that y'all know that money is coming out of a phone call from John Burns one morning saying, hey, there's some emergency money up here, y'all need to put a list together. So that's how it started, from that phone call, and it ended by Ann Purcell sitting there in the board meeting, helping us to get our share of that money. So that is two officials that was a benefit to us to get this funding.
What amount was that?
Basically, we have to match $5,607 to get $34,392 more. Not a bad deal.
And the amount the chairman was just asking, I believe what you referred to, we put together an estimate for $49,132.32. We're going to get 70% of that amount, which was 34 and stuff right now. Mr. Chairman, 34.
$392.62.
So that's the amount.
Toss the.
And actually, that's 70%. Yeah, there you go.
I believe that's right. Yes, right. I believe it was 70% up to the 40,000 is what the letter said.
On facts and finding number one, the allocation is based on the total centerline road miles for Effingham County's road system.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that all roads?
All improved roads, yes, ma'am.
That includes subdivisions?
Yes, ma'am.
That have been turned over.
The ones that we count as accepted, that's correct.
So that's what I'm trying to verify, is if we take care of some of the issues with getting some of the
We get
roads
more
turned
money.
over, then if we had already done that, we'd be getting money.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. We fill out the LRA form every time we make one motion for road acceptance.
Yeah.
That goes to
Just
GI.
like this right here. Every dollar's a help. I don't think we've got a problem with finding places that we need to spend it. It's trying to get enough to do it.
And unfortunately, this money's already spent. We just get it back in this case, so that was a good thing.
All right. So can I do this in one motion, one action to do both LeMay projects? Or would this board rather handle it individually? Let's do it individually, then we won't muddy the water.
Then we need to add it to the agenda.
Well, it's both on there.
I do apologize for the confusion I created. Again, when I put this on the agenda, it was before Mr. Roser had stated it, and I probably should have just went back and added a separate item. I don't know the answer to that. Refer to our parliamentary, Mr. Godwall.
Well, consideration for approval of Effingham County's 2014 LeMay project list.
You add it to the list.
This is all project list. It just is comprised of two different lists.
It sort of is one of the requests. It's all our 2014 money. They just wanted them separated on two lists because of the request, because one came from emergency fund and one comes from normal appropriations.
So let's do it as one action. If I can get a motion to,
There's only one letter.
sir?
There's only one letter in here to be transmitted to the state, I think.
It's the same application, but there will be a separate application on both. It's two.
Because the letter that I've got from Terry Gable states, these funds will be in addition to the county's 2014 LeMay allocation. Just need to complete and execute the LeMay application agreement to meet all the requirements.
Can we make a motion where we approve the 2014 LeMay project list
To
as well as the, what do you call the second part?
the LeMay emergency funds list.
It's still a 2014 LeMay project list. There's just two separate lists in this case, but both of them are called the exact same thing. We're just basically making two duplicate submittals with different projects.
So the list.
So, make a motion to approve the 2014 LeMay, two separate project lists as described.
Good for me. One list is inclusive of McCall and Blue Jay.
Yes. Maybe it was a typo on my part when I put approved the 2014 LeMay project lists. I should have put an S in there.
And the other is the emergency list. And do we have a clarification from this board as to the answer to your question as to how to best spend that money, to put more of it on the call, or do you need that clarification?
I believe we do, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this is, that may be part of the next short-term work program.
That's what I'm
In
thinking.
the road section, that we'll certainly get into that in that time.
But it's the list that we're worried.
As long as the board's fine with spending the money on those two roads, I don't think it matters where we have it allocated, as long as we spend that total amount. So I've already asked that particular question. As long as we spend that or more, it's fine. They don't really care if we spend more on one road than the other. As long as it's the total amount spent between those two roads.
Do I have a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. All right, that's the last item of business. Who wants to start? Steve, you got anything? I never like to leave, I always leave you to last.
That's all right, just in case y'all have.
You got anything?
All right, to bring up.
Joanne? You got anything?
No, sir, I think y'all should pull together a list.
Okay. Mr. Kovac?
I'd like to have one brief one. The county, when we adopted the standard operating procedures for animal control, we have found one small area that needs to be tightened up just a bit. And that is it has always been staff's internal policy not to release the adopter's information. We had an incident, two incidences very recently, where owners or previous owners requested the adopter's information. We did not provide that based on our own historical action after discussion with the county administrator. And we would like to continue to do that, so I'd like to notify you that we'll be bringing that before the board to amend those SOPs to include the fact that we will not release adopter's information, but between now and the time that we bring that back to the board, it will be our statement that we will not release adopter's information.
Can we do that with freedom of the records?
That's a good question for the attorney.
I guess we can, they just, if it's a open records request, it has to go through the process.
I would obviously say that contact information, all those things would obviously be exempt by freedom of
Whatever
information.
for that, yeah.
Well, when the adoptee reaches 18, if they want to make it their, they can petition.
We'll review
They're very unfortunate events, but I think that if the caller is referencing, just give me their name and I'll call and ask them until they do what I want them to do, and that's all it is.
Well, from the You Won't Believe This department, talk about an honorable guy. I just looked at my email. Steve, I appreciate your efforts in my case after reading Doug's statement and also the one commissioner's comment about equipment damage to the surrounding road surface. I'm now convinced that this was not caused by a machine. Also, I don't believe that he was out at the site before I went through it. Obviously, this one might tell. The road crew did not show up until later when I came back to take pictures. So I don't think they could have caused this. I'm not sure what Doug would do this, but I think the board came to the right conclusion today. Even though the roads really do suck and I hate that my car is going to wilt like this for a while. Sorry to waste everyone's time, not sure what to do.
You say you like the glimmer of brightness in a dark world? That's it.
There's a good story for the newspaper.
That's an honorable guy to do that.
You're right.
That is.
You're right. Well, he was happy in that there.
And it makes the board feel better about the fact that at least 4 made the right decision.
We know that Lisa Hayes is going to make the right decision every time.
Mr. Allen,
Yes, sir.
you got something?
A few things.
We got a few things.
You should have a packet.
Will you discuss the thing that I forwarded you about the road today? And your,
What was the road?
yes.
You have that yours?
No, that was,
Here.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. Not y'all. Herb Road, we continue to go down the road of negotiations. Really not much happened since the court case on that.
Nobody said, okay, let's go out there, let's stake it, let's look at it, nothing?
Yeah, they want us to go do that. We need to set up a time, I need to set up a time in order to meet Mr. Davis. I gotta find a mutually agreeable time. Yes, that is what Matthew, his name Matthew, had come up with. Yes, they want the road staked. They want, Troy wants to be there when the road is staked. He wants the road bed and the right of way. So we just need to have a time to do that.
Have we gotten those signs done yet?
No, there was last year to do so. He had to order them. He told me it'd take about 2 weeks. It's been a week or so ago whenever the consent order was actually sent. I sent it to him that day. So we ought to have them up fairly soon. So they're working on doing so.
But we're working on it.
Correct. He had to get signed. He didn't have them later on.
Okay.
Westwood Heights, I'll say that's virtually finished at this point. The last piece, the piece of the board with the change order on underneath the floor, Effingham has been installed. So that's virtually done. They should be wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks. I have not heard of any complaints on rain since then, which is a good thing. I hope y'all haven't either. Jail construction, your normal weekly report is included in your packages up there. And I'll take the time at this point to say the sheriff has offered all of y'all a tour if you would like to see that facility. I believe somebody mentioned that they had yet to see it. I'm trying to remember who it is.
I broke by, I think we talked about it.
Making some progress.
So if the board would like to set up some time to go as a board, possibly a workshop, we don't have enough of them, before a meeting or something. The sheriff said he would like to be there to basically go through and explain the operations of the jail, not necessarily the architecture of it, but the operations, so he could explain how things work. I believe, stop me if I'm wrong, but I believe most of the cells are in, the roof's going up, it looks like a jail now. You can actually tell what's going on and what's happening. So if this board would like to do so together at a meeting, he's offered to give you all a free tour. Just need to know if you'd like to do it, we'll set it up.
Know where to go?
It has to be where we don't have a workshop.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just gonna have to be one afternoon. Figure that.
Yeah,
We
and there,
need to make sure it's.
Well, we could go, like, we already have a workshop the next meeting at 3, the next meeting we can make, maybe there a workshop at 4.
Oh, we're gonna have a workshop then too.
I feel that we are, but I believe they typically stop working around 5 or 6, so we can go before that, we'll just have to throw on hard hats and vests and so forth, but we'll look cool doing it, so it'll all be good.
If there's a time anybody just wants to meet out there, one afternoon, 5 o'clock.
And it doesn't necessarily even have to be on a board meeting day, it doesn't have to be a workshop, if the preponderance of y'all is together, I'm assuming we'd have to, advertise it as such, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on a commission day, we can certainly meet out there. Because honestly, to tour that facility and take the entire speech probably will take more than an hour to get there, back, and have all the discussions. I mean, it doesn't take that long to run through, but if you want to say this is how, you the complete operations and lock some of the office cells and see how it feels and all.
I believe,
Eric, is that open? I mean, if we were to meet there at 5 o'clock one afternoon.
inspections of property,
Going to meet to inspect county facility.
we could still give them a friendly call to come out. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, y'all welcome to come too.
As long as
Yeah, I
we
think
discuss
it's
no
good.
other business.
It's no more than going to the thing over a meeting or whatever. You're not discussing, as long as it takes action.
So again, it doesn't have to be on a day. If the board, number one, would even like to, and if so, we'll work on a day that y'all can all get together and do so, or at least whoever wants to.
Next week.
Next Tuesday.
Later, or later.
I mean, Tuesday afternoon, 5 o'clock?
Yeah, again, later is probably better, because it'd be better if the structure were ended.
That's what I say, if they finish at 5.
Yeah, next Tuesday at 5.
Sounds good with everybody?
Yeah.
So that,
We will speak with the sheriff, make sure he can be there, our tour guide can show up hopefully. no, just take over.
That two ways are well.
No, it's just perfect. Just want, just, you know, make sure Jimmy's around.
Yeah, we'll work on that tomorrow.
Well, we'll work on that.
You know, be so bad tour, have fun or something.
You'll be gone.
You bring those mic and ask them on the subway.
What? I thought you liked that.
Policy updates, all of y'all should have gotten, along with your book, a financial policies for the Board of Commissioners, along with a rules of procedure. I want to stress a couple of things here. We took and went through every existing policy that we could possibly find, which was quite an extensive list. And the intent was to combine as many as possible into one document and have one single document rather than a bunch of different ones, and to repeal the ones that don't need to exist. I do apologize. I believe I've been telling y'all consistently y'all have the financial policies at this meeting, which obviously you do not. My initial thought was that we were going to go through and make 6 or 8 corrections per the corrective action plan. And looking at it, it appeared that it was probably more prudent to do it this way. So what you end up with is a rather thick document. So I want to stress a couple of things. One, this is very, very highly draft. We made it as far as getting all those documents in some sort of digital format or recreating them, putting them all together, making the formatting work, and that's about where it stopped. So it's definitely going to take some work, and I was kind of have a workshop at the next meeting, which we've already had another workshop to take place, but at some point we need to go through these in some detail, determine what the board does and does not want to put it in these policies. So again, all we try to do is take everything existing, push it together. So please don't get, upset about any particular thing that you may or may not see in here. It's just a starting point to have a conversation with. So I just want to bring that up. We'll get to that. And, hopefully the next meeting we'll have it as a discussion at minimum on the agenda, so we can begin to go through them. And we as staff will continue to refine this document also. We just want it in your hands as quickly as possible, because it is a fairly substantial rewrite of what we have. I'm going to skip over this so Ms. Johnson can come back, because this is what she was asking about. Claxton Public Gas, Claxton Gas came by doing some public surveys required by the PSC. You all should have a copy up there. If you would please just fill that out really quick so I can send it back to them, I would appreciate it tonight. It's a one-page document that just says yes, no, what do you understand about this, what do you know about that? It's something that they're required to do by the Public Safety Commission. There should be 2 sheets together. The first one's informational. You have to close that on your fridge. Yes, that's the one. In case you smell gas, you'll know exactly what to do. It shouldn't take a second. If you would please do that and leave them here, I would certainly appreciate that. There's also a letter included in your packet that came from Hospice Savannah. They are creating a center for living in Savannah, presumably. And they are asking for donations, not specifically from the Board of Commissioners, just in general as a request for donations. If that's something the board would like to consider doing, we can add that to the agenda and be voted on. Just let me know if anybody would like to consider giving something to hospice. One thing that's been brought to our attention, each and every year, our fire department as well as our police participates in events such as the Rankin Christmas Parade, the City of Guyton Christmas Parade, and the fair parade that comes through. And they would like to continue to do so. So my question for this board is, does anybody have any issue with them continuing to do so?
I think we should.
So unless somebody has a problem with it, we're going to tell Mr. Burns to show up and look through this on like jail tour we talked about, pose up next to the building regulations. On the 20th of September, 9:00 a.m. in this room, there's a meeting set up with the building grievance board. I believe we're probably going to try to invite the homeowners association, or at least some of their delegates, to show up to that also for public input into the building regulation amendments as per the board's direction at the last meeting to obtain that information. So I'm telling all of y'all, if you'd like to show up September the 20th, 9:00 a.m. in this room. And Ms. Johnson could probably add it to y'all schedules if you'd like.
She can, if you'll tell me again what that is.
September the 20th, 9 a.m. in this room. The room should have already been reserved. Ms. Kieran should have done that prior to her leaving. It's reserved all day on the 20th, but the particular meeting is at 9:00.
Now, is that only for those items that we had discussed, or is that to go over the new amendments that's by the state that's taking effect January 1st?
I hate to admit this, but it's the absolute truth. Noel sent it out. I picked the date off of it. I honestly, I don't know. Noel's meeting.
I think they're going over the amendments that's coming.
They very well could be, Chair. I didn't read the email. I'll be glad to forward the email to the entire board. If you like, or send it to Ms. Johnson, who can do so. The one that Noel sent out outlines what the meeting's about.
Okay.
Again, I picked the date off of it. I'm sorry. I didn't really read the whole email. There should be in the very back of your packages a couple little flow charts in there, organizational charts of some proposed things that we have been talking about doing organizationally with staff. There's no major moves here, small things around we believe can increase efficiencies and help consolidate some departments a little bit. The first thing that I have to say coming upon this is there's absolutely zero job losses in contemplating any of this. There's a movement of people, well, that's about it. And there are some of the people that we're discussing being moved that don't yet know we're talking about them being moved. Some do, some don't. One's behind me, I have spoken with him, he understands that I'm asking him to do some additional things, so it's a good thing he knows because he's in here. But there are some other ones that I'm maybe asking him to look after that don't know that they're asked to be looked at. I guess what you said, so.
So we'll start getting anonymous letters about you.
So there's some stuff in there. Of course, we can certainly discuss that at detail, however the board would like to proceed. I just want to get you that. There's no names on it whatsoever. There are some positions that you probably won't recognize. It doesn't necessarily mean it's new people. It means it may be a new title of the way we're titling that department. So again, if the board would like to add that as an item that we can discuss going further, there are some things that I believe would help. One of which we'll probably discuss in the roads section of the short-term work program. The other is probably the only additional position that I would contemplate is in the building department. I believe that their level of permits has risen to a point that they probably need some additional help. My personal opinion is that we should probably look to hire a building official to get that building that department more autonomous again as it used to be. And there would just be, that would be the additional person, would be the additional building official rather than just another inspector, a chief inspector, however you want to say that. Which certainly could be, or JP, I'm sorry, I said the name, could be somebody completely in that department currently, should they choose to apply for that. But that and one other position we'll talk about is the only two possibly additional positions. Again, the rest is just title movement. It may look like there's some, but there's really not. Additional personnel. Through truck ordinance, this has been talked about for a while with this board. Mr. Kovac has drafted such an ordinance. I believe the only thing left to be done is for this board to decide which road we want to preclude trucks from going there. And so we'll bring that to you at your next meeting on the 24th with the only additional item. We'll certainly take a stab at it, and we'll just have to see if that's what the board wants to do or not. As far as we want to preclude trucks, through trucks from using these truck routes.
How about contact sheriff, see if he has any input on that, if he has a recommendation?
Yes, we are. Mr. Kovac's already done so. He met with the sheriff's department. And I told the sheriff we were doing it. He's aware of it. I know the same day I was having a conversation out with all the other room discussing with whomever you were discussing it with. Because one of the things Scott was in there with the ordinance, he was, but anyhow, yes, we've done something. To back up on my list, road acceptance, there were some letters that came from Mickey Kicklighter on 5 different subdivisions, stating an opinion as to why he believed we already own those roads. One is in the city of Guyton, so it's in me. The attorney has been forwarded some information that he thought may be prudent to help this decision. So he's certainly looking into that. We would anticipate having that on the next agenda for some form of action as to what we need to do with that. The particular situation that Commissioner Jones referenced was in Canterbury subdivision off of 119.
I'm sorry, I was just letting you know, I believe that's in this district.
Since it's up here 119 on the north side of 119 near Old Louisville Road is where it's located. It's 18 lots. The last inspection was done in April of 12 or 13, I can't remember when I pulled the list. There was, last year, 12, April of 12, and there were 6 items on that list. At that particular time, we wouldn't address any back taxes or any of those other issues. That was just 6 outstanding issues that Public Works found, and I don't believe that has our water sewer, maybe guidance. So those would be the only 6 punch list items on the county's perspective. There is a closing that very well may be lost in there because of the VA law. So there's an interest in trying to see if there was anything we could do with that, which I would presume would come under this auspice of this same overall discussion that we're having here. If it is in fact the county's position that we do own these roads because of what makes us here or whatever reason, I would assume this would be the exact same case. I did pull that plat, that was not forwarded to the attorney, was not one of them, and I don't recall those statements wrong or not.
There's numerous subdivisions, that's the issue.
So, if there's any issue, it certainly needs to move forward. We'll have something on the agenda the 24th to discuss this issue. Another issue I'd like to bring up, and it's also good that Steve's still in here, is there's an issue, and this is the property, this is the remaining property from Winfield subdivision. What was going to be the latter phases of that particular one. A gentleman there, and I didn't know his name, what was Larson. Mike Larson had purchased that property. He wishes to place a mobile home on that property, roughly in the center. You should have some information in your packages there also, with some correspondence that went back and forth, some cost estimates to provide those connections via county and or well septic tank. There's a couple of maps that just show his preferred routes, and there's one showing the water and sewer in that location. And there's, I guess, 2 separate issues here. Chapter 75 is our codes, which sort of mirrors the state codes. The only difference is ours contemplates water and sewer, the state on, as far as the health department, environmental health only looks at sewer also. Basically, the state is the service, water or sewer is available within 200 feet of the property line, the person must connect. So obviously, in this case, there's water in the right of way of Highway 30, so it's certainly available within 200 feet, and sewer goes through the middle of the property into a pump station. So the ordinance would certainly say that that person would have to connect. This is somewhat similar but different than the situation of Iowa Luther. And what I think we'll bring this on the 24th also to ask the board a couple different questions. I believe that Mr. Larson basically asked for the dial service so that he can go to the health department and he can get a septic system, a permit for a septic system. And I believe we would also have to grant a variance from our ordinance if we were to do this because it technically requires a connection for water also. So if the board chose to do so, I believe it would be 2 actions, one a variance from our ordinance for water and probably just a denial. Would that be a problem? If it's not reasonably available.
We need to do something, this is a large tract of land.
If the board chose to go that way, I think that's what would be required. If the board chooses to say this is what the ordinance says, this is what you need to do, then obviously nothing applies to connect our system. In this particular instance, it's a rather large tract of land. What I don't know is if the ordinance really contemplated this scenario on larger tracts of land. Because, and I say that to say the ordinance actually says within 200 feet of the property line, but it's completely feasible, possible that a structure could be located 2,000 feet from a property line, and then the ordinance would then require them to connect. So those are things for the board to consider. Obviously, it's not on your agenda tonight. I just wanted you to be aware of it. There's some information there. It will be on your agenda on the 24th. About the last thing that I have, I will push on the session, is that the law library state, the drug court has been asking for funding in different mechanisms and manners. Some of that has been before y'all as an MOU amended. There's been some requests for funding, which the board has somewhat facilitated. The last one was that the law library has some funds available that they would like to donate to the drug court. The way that they want to do that is through the Board of Commissioners. They want to give us a check and us disperse those funds. What the law states is that the law library can fund purchases in drug courts. So what we have asked, we being staff and the chairman, have asked Mr. Rafter, who was the delegate, I guess, for the law library that came forward, was to provide us with very specific purchases, and we believe that we can do that through a budget amendment, through the Board of Commissioners. It is my understanding, although I don't want to speak for him since he's not here, that they would rather just give us money and have us deal with it. It's staff and legal counsel's opinion that's not legal. We would prefer not to go down that route. I particularly don't want to go to jail other than for a tour. So we're still working through that issue. Back at the retreat, I happened to just on the way out run Senator Hill, who asked a question, so I said, surely there's something you can do for us, and this is this law library issue. You have a letter in your package there that has been drafted, that I drafted, and there you come, help me out on that and provide some additional verbiage. And I want to bring it to the board's attention for one very particular reason, that in the second and third paragraph, it states the board is asking that you take up and consider legislation. So I don't want, if the board is going to do it, I want the board to say that you're understanding that, number one, you're asking for that, and do this what you want to do. And if so, I will send this to him, and he has so kindly agreed to review the law and have state law reviewed by the state. I guess AG would review this to give their interpretation on it, and also to tell us if they believe there's any other recourses under the law we can currently do. So you don't have to answer me today. I know you haven't read the letter, but if y'all please let me know if you have any objections to doing so. I would like to send that to him so that we can then set up some time with this law library to try and navigate these issues.
But basically, this letter is to Senator Hill to try and get an answer, right, Eric, I would think, from the AG's office.
No, it's not. It's just asking them to clarify the legislation, specifically allow funding of the drug court, and to clarify the mechanics of payment. What it says is that the library trustees can fund purchases. That to me, you could make the argument, well, that means that the county commissioners can decide what's going to be purchased. I would rather have a library trustees decide what they're going to fund, because the statute says they can decide to fund purchases, not we can decide. I would much rather have it handled that way, or have the legislation clarified.
But the bottom line is this thing started out as $100,000, and now it's down to 50. And there was a precedent set by the county back at the time the judicial complex was built, because they were able to wiggle furnishings at the time that building was built, and they transferred some of these funds out of the law library.
Furnishings are one of the things that are specifically identified in the statute.
So we had a meeting with Judge Turner, Judge Thompson, and others to sit there, and basically I told them my concerns over the fact that I didn't want to tick any judges off, but this, I just couldn't see in the statute a clear way to do this. So to make a long story short, this board took action after that last meeting to, what's the term, the other fund.
The DATE funds.
Date fund. We helped them out in that regard. Also, we allow finance to pay their bills in anticipation then of waiting on the grant money to come. So we've taken what actions that we could, and then they come back, now they want $50,000 for a state drug court, with Judge Turner is on the Superior Court. Am I getting it right?
I'm not clear on that, or whether the actual last request was for state or superior, I'll be honest with you.
But the bottom line is, I told them that what they need to do is get the law changed to where the county can intervene, because right now, if this board takes action to fund a drug court for $50,000, that's not only something that's not in our budget for the year, then it becomes an item that, once you create something that's kind of party that uncreated. So they said, well, you give us the money, we'll give you $50,000 and y'all figure out how to deal with it. And I'm not very good with that. So, I think what we're asking is that this board's okay with us to send this letter on behalf of the board, asking Senator Hill to see if there's some way to help clarify the law library use of their funds.
Or come up with other mechanisms through the legislature to fund the court. We should be, I think we should be getting funds for the DATE program from the city courts as well.
Well, and there is another mechanism, and he brought that up when I asked that the governor has put away quite a sum of money to fund these types of courts, but unfortunately someone was late in preparing the grant application. You know, the previous year there was an $80,000 grant for the operations. We probably could have continued to get that, but unfortunately it was not applied for. So that was the other hard part of navigating that conversation, is them saying, well, why didn't you just apply for this because the funding was available? Well, there's another story behind that, but it just wasn't done.
The court didn't want to pursue.
And it wasn't on county side, it wasn't, anybody in this building didn't do that.
So is it okay by the board for us to send this letter to Senator Hill? Nobody object?
That was all.
Okay, before you make your motion, let's put a little icing on this cake. I received a thank you card dated August 27th. It says, to the Board of Commissioners of Effingham County, I just wanted to thank the commissioners for the recent 3% cost of living raise you gave to Effingham County employees. I realize that financial times are difficult for everyone, but I just wanted to thank you on behalf of me and my family. It's Nancy Gillenwater. She's the office manager of the Sheriff's Department. How about that?
Two thank yous in the same night.
Any other staff? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the executive session. I presume we've got something.
Yeah, we do. Something's even good. Not for me. Great.
Can I have a motion?
You go to executive session to discuss personnel policies.
Property and
Property,